The story narrates the advent of a young boy, Tuya Mochizuki, who dies by mistake and meets the Supreme Being who caused his death. The Supreme Being apologizes to Tuya for causing his death. He admits to making a blunder and dropping lightning in the wrong place, but he is surprised at Tuya's calmness despite discovering his death. Tuya says he is calm because there is no point complaining over a done deed, but he never expected he would die at 15. The Supreme Being tells him he will resurrect, but in a different world according to the rules. The Supreme Being grants Tuya the advantage of making special requests to make up for his mistake. Tuya only requests to take his smartphone to the new world. The Supreme Being agrees but says he cannot interact with any human from his previous life. However, he can follow up with the news. He says Tuya will possess magic skills and will be able to charge his smartphone using magic. Tuya appears in the new world at the base of a mighty tree. He immediately receives a call from the Supreme Being, who informs him of the map he installed on his device to help him navigate the town easily. Tuya, grateful for this feature, walks using the map, but he wonders how he will get food and a place to sleep. While on his way, a carriage rides fast and passes by him. Suddenly the carriage comes to a halt, and a young man jumps out of the carriage and runs towards Tuya. The man begs Tuya to sell his suit and offers to pay a good price. Tuya follows him to his massive fashion shop, where he exchanges his suit and receives a dozen gold coins. The man gives him a recommendation for a good inn on the main street. While moving through the streets, Tuya notices an occurrence in an alley. Two young girls are in a dispute with two men for receiving half payment for a crystal deer antler they fetched for them. Tuya walks in and interrupts their argument. He buys the antler at 1 gold coin from the girls and breaks it while still in the man's hands. Tuya knows the basics of his new magic skills and has received a boost from the Supreme Being, so he is confident in his fighting skills. The men charge toward him, but he beats them without any effort. He gives the girls the coin and they introduce themselves as twins, Elsa and Linza Silueska, and they thank him for saving them. The more outspoken twin Elsa questions his purpose for coming to the town, and he says he's heading to the Silver Moon Inn. Elsa says they also stay at the inn, and they lead him there. At the inn, Tuya pays for a 1-month stay. The girls discuss their reason for delivering the antler, and they decide to register at the guild to get more proper quests. Tuya proposes to follow them since he needs a job, and they agree to show him the way, because he saved their lives. At night, Kelvin presses his phone and reads the news about his favorite band in his previous world. He is disappointed in the information, and says a lot has happened in a day. The next day, they go to the guild to register. While the girls read the available quests from their boards, they discover his inability to read the writings, and they assist him in reading an available quest on his board. The quest says they will defeat beast monsters in the forest to the east, and present 5 one-horned wolf horns with an 18 copper coin reward. Elsa claims that Tuya is strong, and she proposes they form a party. She goes on to apply for the job at the counter. Outside the guild, they create a hunting position with Linza as the rear guard, and Elsa and Tuya as the vanguard. Elsa advises Tuya to secure his weapons and guild card, because getting them reissued is stressful. They finally arrive in the forest, and they attack the wolves. Elsa attacks them with heavy punches. Tuya cuts through the wolves with his sword, and Linza summons her fire magic to burn them. Tuya shows his amazement at her display of magic. They succeed in killing 6 wolves instead of the required 5. The receptionist at the guild sees the 6th horn after they submit the 5, so she asks Tuya about it. He says it's a memento of their first mission. She stamps their cards and presents their rewards to them. At the inn, Linza thanks Tuya for his help in the forest and commends his effort. Tuya requests to learn how to read and write their language, and Elsa suggests Linza as his teacher, being the smarter one. She obliges, and Tuya further requests to be taught magic by her. Linza mentions that he needs aptitudes to be able to perform magic. Tuya claims he does not know his aptitude, but someone important gave him the magic seal of approval. He asks for a way to detect his aptitude, and Linz brings out 7 spellstones that store, amplify, and release magical energy for the 6 elements of life and null magic. Linza brings out the water spellstone and chants to summon the water in the cup. She says Elsa only has the aptitude for fortification magic, therefore she cannot use the water spellstone. Tuya decides to try out the water spellstone to confirm his aptitude. Immediately he performs the chants, and the water comes out with very high pressure. They move outside to try out the other spellstones, and to their shock, Tuya has aptitudes for all the 6 elements. Linza questions who he is and says no one has ever explored using the 6 elements. Tuya asks about the null magic, and she tells him it does not have a specific spell chant. It can work for fortification magic, increase strength, or create a gateway that allows time travel. She says only one person has access to one spell from the null magic, and the spell comes naturally. Tuya takes a special interest in the time-traveling chant, and he tries it out. The stone glows, and a portal opens for them. The portal links them to the eastern forest where they killed the wolves. Lindsay says the portal allows the caster to travel to places they have been before. They go inside the inn and the twins call him incredible, but Tuya says the Supreme Being deserves the credit. Micah, the inn's owner, interrupts their discussion and brings in a girl, Air, who works at a cafe. She seeks their recommendations for dessert dishes popular among women to add to their cafe menu as travelers. Tuya recommends ice cream for her, and he researches the recipe with his smartphone. The girls are surprised at his device and they ask him about it, but he says they cannot read it. They prepare the recipe, and Elsa freezes it with her ice water magic. Air says she loves the dish and will add it to the menu. Tuya and the twins get a new quest to deliver a letter to the royal capital of a different city. The alternative quest listing is to defeat mega slimes, but the twins reject the offer because of how messy and squishy the slimes are. They decide to grab a meal and find an inn like the Silver Moon Inn in their city. Tuya suggests they go back through the gate spell and come back at dawn, but the twins reject the offer, claiming it is not fun that way. Tuya sees a crowd gathering in the middle of the street and gets curious about the situation. At the center of the gathering, a young samurai girl attacks a group of men who try to defend some of their friends, whom she had earlier handed over to the guards for running amok. She uses a special technique called the Jujutsu, which amazes the twins. She halts halfway into the fight due to her weakness from hunger. Just immediately, Tuya summons his sand magic and defends her from an incoming attack by one of the men. The twins join the fight, claiming Tuya cannot evade trouble. Shortly after, someone announces the presence of the guards and they all escape from the scene. At an alley, Kokonai Yae, the samurai girl, appreciates them for their assistance. Tuya introduces himself and asks if she's from Ishin. She says she is from Oedo, Ishin, and asks if Tuya is also from there, since they both have family names. Tuya declines, and the twins look at him with questioning eyes because he claims to be from Ishin. Yae's stomach growls loudly from hunger because she lost her funds on her way. At the eatery, Yae eats loudly and devours all the food, to Elze and Tuya's amazement. Lindsay engages her in a conversation, and she says she is on her way to train for martial arts at the royal capital, so she can join the list of warriors in her family's generation. Lindsay asks her to travel with them, and she gladly accepts the offer. Tuya and the twins continue their journey to the royal capital in their carriage. Yae is knowledgeable in equestrian arts, so she drives the carriage's horse perfectly. Lindsay presents Tuya with a book that contains different spell chants for the null magic. She says many people do not know many spells because only a few people can use the null magic. Tuya reads through all the magic spells in the book and uses them perfectly. He chants funny spells at the twins and says he cannot memorize all the spells even though God boosted his memory. He tries the spell, a ports that draws distant objects to him, and he draws Yae's ribbon to his hands. The twins warn him to avoid doing bad things like stealing or pickpocketing with the spell. He chants the spell for long sense that allows him to perceive smell from a distance and see far visions. He suddenly perceives the smell of blood and gives Yae the direction to drive towards. Some monsters attack a carriage and kill the guards. Tuya and his party defend them by killing the monsters with their blades and magic. Shortly afterward, a new set of monsters appears and they fight them off again. Tuya notices a man in a hood summoning the lizard men monsters. He uses the friction slip spell, and the man slips and falls off. They arrest him and tie him up. The guards protecting the carriage thank the party for rescuing them, and a voice cries out from the carriage for help. Tuya and the twins rush in to see a young princess asking for help to save her butler Liam. He has an arrow in his chest and is almost bleeding to death. Tuya draws the broken arrow out of his chest using magic, and he heals him with the healing magic. The young lady appreciates their help wholeheartedly. Lime introduces himself as the butler to Duke Ortlander, and says the young lady is the Duke's daughter and the king's niece. The twins and Yae immediately go on their news. They are surprised at Tuya for being calm and still on his feet, while a member of the royal family is present. Tuya questions what she is doing on the road, and she says she was returning to the royal capital from visiting her grandmother when she got attacked by the bandit. The butler employs Tuya and his party to guard them through the roads to the royal capital, and he promises them great rewards. They all accept since they are also going to the royal capital. Eventually, they arrive at the capital of Belfast Eliphas, built on the bank of Lake Pallet, formed by water flowing down. They walk into the castle and open their mouths in shock to see the number of maids. The Duke and his daughter run to meet each other, and they hug tightly. The Duke bows to Tuya in appreciation for saving his daughter. They sit down to have tea, and the Duke discusses with Tuya. The Duke thinks his daughter was attacked and kidnapped, so a ransom can be demanded from him. Sue walks to meet them in a pink ball gown, and apologizes for keeping them waiting. Alfred questions if she has spoken with Ellen, her mother, and she says yes, but she did not mention the incident to avoid worries. The Duke apologizes to Tuya for not being able to meet his wife. He says she is blind and she lost her vision when she fell ill 5 years ago. He tells him different healing magic spells had been performed, but only fragments of her body received healing. He then says if his wife's father was still alive, he would have healed her because he wielded a special magic. and that was why the princess traveled to see her grandmother if she could unravel his magic. Sue wishes she could find someone who can use her grandfather. The Duke informs her it is his null magic, and no one else can use it. Ye and the twins storm Tuya and point at him immediately. They visit Ellen's bedroom, and Tuya heals her with the healing null magic. They are all overjoyed, and the twins hail his special power. Before they leave, the Duke gives them 40 platinum coins as a reward, and they are shocked because 1 platinum coin is approximately 10 gold coins. He also gives them 4 royal medals that give them a pass at checkpoints and access to noble facilities. They leave the castle and deliver their letter to their assigned receiver. Tuya says they are heading back to Reflet village and asks Ye for her next move. She says she respects Tuya's humility despite possessing such great powers, and would like to join their party so she can train better. Tuya accepts her, and the twins welcome her gladly. Tuya and his party walk through the streets in the royal capital of Belfast, and Elsa proposes they go shopping. She suddenly spots a girl with a cattail roaming in a spot, and draws their attention to her. They go on to meet her, and she complains she is lost. She planned to meet with her sister at a particular place, but did not know the location. Tuya brings out his smartphone, and they take her to the location using the map. She sees her sister waiting for her and runs to meet her. The sister thanks them for taking care of her, and they leave. They decide to go shopping, but go separately, and agree to meet back at the inn in 2 hours. The girls finish shopping, and they wait for Tuya. He runs in breathlessly, apologizing for his lateness. He checks the time on his smartphone and realizes he is 25 minutes late. Ye is surprised he can tell the time from the device, and he says the phone is like his own null magic. Elsa questions the furry collar coat he bought, and he says it increases the magic resistance to affinities he possesses. Ye says the coat looks good on him, but he gets shy about the compliment and runs from their presence. They all laugh at him. Tuya is back at the inn in Reflet, and he enters Micah's shop. He sees 2 men seated playing the shogi game he modeled from a wood several days before. Micah tells him she wished he used his smart brains for the shop, and not for things like shogi. The first man complains about having nothing to do because of the rain, and the other man, Baral, says his wife is in charge of his shop. Tuya asks about his friends from Micah, and she says Lindsay is in the room, while Elsa and Ye have gone to the parents' cafe shop to buy the new dessert, which he gave Air the recipe for. Just then, Ye and Elsa walk in from the rain with dessert packs. They distribute the dessert to everyone, and Elsa asks Tuya to deliver one to the Duke. He reluctantly agrees to go alone, and tries to convince Elsa to go with him. At the Duke's castle, Sue enjoys the roll cake happily, and the Duke envies Reflet Town for having different food recipes. Tuya decides to drop the recipe at the castle for the mansion's chefs to prepare, and Sue expresses her excitement. Tuya introduces the shogi game set to the Duke. He tells him the game set is a 2-player set where the winner captures the opponent's king. The Duke plays the shogi all night, and the princess tickles him intensely for not allowing her to play the game. Tuya returns to his town, drained and weak from playing shogi. The next morning, Tuya and the girls visit the guild at the royal capital and see a lot of quests. Tuya proposes the Mega Slime's quests again, and they all scream in disagreement, including Ye. Elsa threatens him playfully, and he fearfully takes another quest. Tuya and the girls fight a very strong and mighty knight in the demolished old royal capital castle. They defeat the knight through magic, and Elsa says she killed about 21 horned wolves. After their adventure, they try to locate a treasure in the demolished building. Tuya uses the search treasure spell, and he finds nothing. Lindsay advises him to search for a different name as he may not consider the artifact a treasure. Tuya searches using the search historical artifact spell, and he discovers a big artifact underneath the demolished walls. Lindsay clears their path through an explosion that scares the others, and they find a door that leads to an underground dungeon. Lindsay lights their path with the illumination spell, and they walk through the dungeon. Elsa expresses her fear, and Tuya teases her for not taking the front guard part position while in the dungeon. They appear in front of a mighty door with unreadable engravings. Kelvin takes pictures of the engravings on his phone. Elsa spots an earth spell stone on the door and calls their attention. Lindsay says it was set for a mana to activate the spell. Tuya fears it could be a trap. He activates the spell stone, and the door opens with a great rumbling. Inside the dungeon, they see a glass element that absorbs their light into its red core, and everywhere goes dim. It starts regenerating aggressively and emits ear-deafening radiation. Tuya uses the gate portal to send them out of the dungeon. They appear outside the demolished building, and the magic beast follows through shortly after. They attack it with different spells, but it absorbs their magic, and its strength increases. They succeed in killing it, but it regenerates and pierces Elsa's chest. Tuya tells Lindsay and Ye to distract it without using magic. He heals Elsa and links the beast to the shogi game he has been playing. He extracts the magic beast's inner core as the opponent's king using the apport spell. The red core appears in his hands, and Elsa crushes it with her strong punch. The glass body melts into the ground, and they defeat it. The girls are impressed by his smart thinking. Elsa suggests they report the situation to the national government since it is a royal land instead of the guild. They decide to report the experience to the Duke. At the Duke's castle, the Duke says he will arrange for an official expedition to investigate the old royal capital and the magic beast. Tuya shows him a picture of the relief with the engravings, and the Duke is amazed by his smartphone. The Duke says the information might help them unravel the mystery behind the relocation of the capital. He requests Tuya's aid on the matter, and he agrees to render his assistance. Tuya and the girls leave the castle, and they complain about not finding any treasure. Tuya assures them they will find better treasure next time. He opens the gate portal for them to go back home. The Duke summons the attention of Tuya to heal his brother using the recovery spell he used on his wife. He says his brother was poisoned because he intended to have an alliance with the kingdom of Miss Mead, a new kingdom that a beastman rules. Alfred says he suspects the nobles want to gain power through a political marriage with the princess, the king's eldest daughter, who is next in line to the throne. At the royal palace, the Duke and Tuya enter and randomly encounter a noble, Count Balsa, at the stairway. The Count tells him they have just arrested the culprit responsible for his brother's poisoning. He mentions that the ambassador from Miss Mead is the culprit, and suggests they must behead her immediately. The Duke cuts him short and says his brother will decide that. The Count makes a lowly comment, and Tuya uses his slip magic on him, and he falls down the stairs. The king's wife and daughter put on a gloomy face in the king's room. The general and the family's mage are also present in the room. The Duke brings Tuya in, and he applies his recovery magic, which heals him immediately. The king wakes up and thanks him for his help and the other people present in the room. The royal mage questions Tuya about his skills, and she says she would like to see his skills, but he declines. The Duke informs his brother of the information regarding his poisoning, and the ambassador from Miss Mead. The king does not believe that accusation, so he demands to see the ambassador. The ambassador of Miss Mead appears to be the big sister of the lost girl Tuya saved in the street a while back. He expresses his shock as he sees her, and explains their interference to the Duke when he asks. He requests to be taken to the scene of the incident. The general leads him on. While in the room, he holds the wine bottle the Count claims was poisoned, and uses his search spell to find the poison. After his search, he demands the presence of everyone in his party, and the Count as well. They arrive, and Tuya, excited about his detective skills, commences his investigation. He gives the general a cup of wine from a new bottle and says there is no poison. The general drinks it, and he is well. He then offers a cup of wine to the Count from the bottle with the king's glass. The Count declines to drink the wine, but the general forces him. Immediately he drinks the wine, his reflex chokes him, and he acts like there's poison in the wine. Tuya tells him to stop the act, and he asks why he believes there is poison in the glass. He explains that all the king's glasses were laced with poison by the Count, and he confirms the wine Olga, the ambassador, brought is poison-free. The princess is greatly impressed by his detective ability, and she blushes at his sight. The Count tries to run away, but Tuya stops him. The Duke, the king, his wife, and his daughter sit down alongside Tuya, and they have tea together. The princess stands up and speaks to her parents. She says she has seen the man she would like to marry, and the man is Tuya. Tuya opens his mouth wide in shock. The king asks for the princess's reason, and she says he has a good character and brings happiness to the people around him. The king and queen accept her decision and grant her the freedom. Tuya interrupts them and reminds them they do not know his true identity and are not certain if he possesses a good character. He also claims to be a minor who is just over 15, while the princess is just 12 and is not fit for marriage in his country until he is 18. The king tells him most royal families get engaged at 14. The queen also adds that the princess possesses the mystic eyes of intuition that can explain one's true intentions. The king gives them 2 years to know each other and suggests they part ways if his interest does not increase. Later in the night, while lying on his bed, he receives a phone call from the Supreme Being, and he congratulates him on his engagement. Tuya complains about being too young to consider marriage, but the Supreme Being tells him polygyny is a common practice in this new world, and he should adapt. He says he wants him to be happy, and is rooting for him. He drops the call, and Tuya retreats to his thoughts. At the inn in Reflet, Ye and the twins are shocked to see Tuya with the princess. They are even more surprised that he is getting married. The princess introduces herself to them as Yumina, and says she will live with them according to her father's orders. She promises to avoid slowing them down. Yumina says she will register as an adventurer in the guild as well, so they can go on quests together. They all express shock, and Tuya gets bothered. Elsa asks if Tuya will likely be the king if they get married, and the princess agrees by saying their child will be the heir to the throne. The party walks into the forest to fulfill Yumina's mission of killing apes. Yumina says she chose a challenging task to show her capabilities and skills in archery and magic. She uses summoning magic to summon silver wolves to lure the apes out of the forest. Tuya and Linza are surprised at her use of the summoning magic, and she offers to teach him. Shortly afterward, the wolves run out of the forest with the apes chasing behind. They get ready for the attack, and Yumina shoots arrows at the ape. Linza uses her fire magic, and Elsa uses her boost magic to punch them aggressively. Yae uses her jujutsu skills to fight them, and Tuya uses his favorite slip magic to fall them down before attacking them. They successfully defeat all the apes, and the girls commend Yumina for her ability and magic strength. Tuya complains about being the only male among all of them. He tells them people stare at him in jealousy because of the girls and their beauty. They all get embarrassed at his point. Back at the inn, Tuya tries his summoning magic after being taught by the Yumina. He succeeds in summoning a white monarch tiger, to Yumina's amazement. The white monarch belittles Tuya for his skills, and says he lacks formidable magical energy before he tries to make the pact that involves showing off his power. Tuya makes the pact by touching the tiger's head, and transferring magical powers to him. The tiger accepts Tuya as its master, and he gives him the name Kohaku as a significance of their pact. The tiger requests to be at Tuya's side always, but Tuya says he cannot walk with a huge tiger. The tiger immediately turns into a cute little cat, and Yumina carries and hugs her tightly for its cuteness. The other girls come in, and they pass her around without questions. Kohaku screams that she dropped, but they do not listen to him. Tuya and his party set out on a carriage to fulfill their next mission. The girls, including Yumina, look angry and upset about going to investigate the slimes and a slime researcher's castle. The girls complain about the slime, and Yumina expresses her irritation. She tells him the slimes have not been seen in 10 years, and they do not need to find them. Tuya scolds them and says they want the villagers to live in fear of the slimes appearing at any time if they refuse to take action. They enter the slime researcher's castle to search for connections to the production of the slimes. Tuya enters, and while still assuring the girls the place is safe, he receives a loud bang on his head by slime that is shapeshifted into a washing basin. They enter the building, and they discover many slimes from failed research. They scout through the library, and find a step-by-step guidebook on the formation of slimes. They proceed to search the other floors, but they get attacked by slimes on their way. The girls slip on the stairs and fall into a pool of slimes that melts their dresses. They get to the second floor and see statues with slime-molded breasts. Yumina uses magic to aggressively destroy 2 slimes that try to get close to her. In the researcher's room, his skeleton remains on the chair where he died. And shortly, Yumina notices some slimes changing their shapes and molding into 4 naked women. Tuya finds out the researcher was trying to create images of women with slimes, according to his words, the dream of men, until he finally decided. And so he has so many failed slime experiments. They burn down the whole building, and they use the purifying spell to cleanse it. Tuya walks with Kohaku along the streets upon his request to see the street, and people admire him in his cute cat form. Kohaku notices Yae with a young girl crying, and they approach her. Yae says the girl is lost, and she has refused to say her name. Tuya drops Kohaku and uses him to question the young girl. She immediately replies and says her name is Lim. Tuya uses his search spell to find her family, but he cannot find anyone. He then uses his smartphone to find her mother, and he uses magic to make the full connection. He locates her mother, and they go ahead to meet her while she's in front of the guards explaining about her lost daughter. Yae marvels at his smartphone yet again, and asks Tuya if she can locate her brother with his help. She says she has not seen her brother since she left home, so she wants to be certain about his safety. Tuya gets her house details and her brother's physical qualities. He locates her brother and says he is probably in a fight. Yae agrees with him. She tells him he loves his sword so often that he forgets to eat sometimes. She also says that she loves her brother a great deal, and Tuya reminds him of her brother, with his quiet nature and generosity. Tuya says he is happy to be like her beloved brother. Yae mutters a word by mistake, and she stutters with her words. In Tuya's room at the inn, he activates his long sense spell and uses his smartphone camera to view through the wall. He sees Linza while she is dressing up, and he quickly switches off his smartphone. Not long after, he hears a bang on his door, and Linza enters the room. He frets after he sees her, and she notices. She demands his help to read an ancient spellbook she got from an antique shop. She says she went to the antique shop to learn new spells after discovering her fire magic spells were not working in the slime castle because they were indoors. Tuya assists her with the modeling spell to turn some objects into reading glasses that can read the ancient magic script. She suggests they go outside and try the magic. Linza casts the bubble bomb spell many times using her water spell stone, but she does not get it right. Tuya watches on until she suddenly slips, and he lifts her. She says she has exhausted all her mana on the spell and has no strength left. Tuya transfers his mana energy to her, and she regains energy to continue. Lindsay is amazed, and he mentions that the mage of the royal capital family taught him the spell to do that effectively. After regaining her strength, she still gets stuck trying to do the spell. She has to imagine the spell name effectively in her mind to be able to use the spell, but she doesn't know what a bubble bomb looks like. Tuya explains to her the features of a bubble and a bomb, and he tells her to imagine a soap bubble before causing the explosion. This time, she successfully gets the spell, and thanks him for helping. At the inn, Lindsay is lying on the bed and relaxing from exhausting her mana. Elsa laments over breaking her gauntlet while they attack a strong monster. Tuya says she has to get a new one, and they both go to the royal capital to get a new one for her. She tells him she loves the royal capital for having good stuff, even though it's more expensive. She spots a lovely gown and stands in front of the fashion store, staring at the dress until Tuya distracts her attention. She denies liking the dress to avoid looking weak. She says it would look good on Linza, but Tuya refutes her statement and says it would look good on the two of them, and she blushes in embarrassment. He takes her inside the store and buys the dress for her. She expresses her shyness about the dress, but Tuya waves her off. They return to the inn, and the other girls gush over her dress. Her twin sister compliments her especially, and they all say he has to get them the same dress. Tuya chokes Kohaku with his arms while fretting because of the girls' requests. Micah comes in with a letter from the royal palace for Yumina. The letter says she has to be at the palace with Tuya to receive his knighthood reward for helping them solve the incident. Tuya objects and asks if he could decline the offer. Yumina says he can, but he has to publicly state a valid reason for declining the reward. Tuya feels bad that he has to go either way. While Yumina is excited she gets to visit the palace with him. Tuya walks into his new mansion in shock. At the knighting ceremony, he gets rewarded with a big mansion by the king instead of being crowned a knight, which he was expecting. The girls walk alongside him, and they decipher it was a surprise that got him good. Tuya complains the mansion is too big for 5 people, but the girls give him a stern look. Elsa explains to him that if the mansion is a gift from the king, therefore it is for the two couples in love. Linza also agrees with her and tells him the mansion is for him and Yumina. Tuya replies to them and says he likes all 4 of them equally, and they are like family to him. Elsa, Linza, and Ye all turn red from blushing at his statement. They try to evade the conversation, with Elsa deciding to check out the 2nd floor, Linza going to the attic, and Ye accessing the kitchen's view. Yumina, a little hurt in her feelings, says she is okay with his decision, and claiming he likes them all is a step forward. She hopes to be his bride and share her life with him eventually. She mentions she is not one to monopolize while she leaves him to speak with the others. The girls query Tuya again while he is in the garden with Kohaku to confirm his decision about them staying in the mansion. He promises to treat everyone equally and nicely. Yumina tells them to decide on what they discussed when they make up their minds. Tuya tries to detect what they are about, but they call it a secret. Shortly afterward, the king's butler Layim comes to the mansion with different maids and house securities for the mansion. The king's butler informs them about relinquishing his duties at the palace to his son, and he has come to serve the man who saved his younger brother Lean. Tuya and Yumina gladly welcome them in. The Duke arrives at the mansion with his daughter Sue, who screams excitedly to see Tuya. They sit down to have tea with Princess Yumina. Sue says she heard about his engagement to the princess. The Duke wishes he was marrying his daughter, and he teases his brother and Princess Yumina for being cunning and acting fast. The Duke and Sue humorously tell him to marry her alongside the princess. Tuya, speechless about what to say, tells them not to waver from their purpose of visiting. The Duke narrates his purpose. He says the royal capital has an alliance with the kingdom of Mistmead, and they will need to travel across the kingdom, which attracts danger, so they require his help. The princess cuts in and says they need the gate portal, and the Duke agrees to her point. The Duke tells Tuya he will need to travel across to the kingdom when he mentions that the spell only works with where he has been before. Tuya agrees to take the mission. On the day of the journey, troops from the kingdom of Belfast and Mistmead travel together with Tuya and his party. Elsa and Linza drive the carriage while Tuya, Ye, and Yumina play games inside the carriage with Olga, the ambassador for Mistmead, and her little sister. At night, they camp in the middle of the woods, and Tuya tells everyone stories while sitting outside together. Suddenly, Olga stands after sensing movements in the woods, and the troop leader suspects them to be bandits. Tuya uses his phone and magic to detect the bandits' location and paralyze them to prevent them from moving. They arrange them together, and Sir Lion, the knight of the Kingdom of Belfast, suggests they dispatch a mounted runner to fetch guards that will take them away. Tuya and the girls notice the connection between Olga and Sir Lion, and they have conversations about it. The next morning, Tuya, Yumina, and Arma walk down the street of a neighboring village. They spot Sir Lion at a female souvenir shop and approach him. He reacts shocked after being caught off guard. He implies he's getting a gift for his mother. Tuya suspects he is getting a gift for Olga, so he buys a brooch for Arma and questions what Olga loves to help him have a perfect pick. Tuya and the two girls walk away from him, and Yumina says she wishes he got her a gift as well, but Tuya is oblivious to her feelings, so he apologizes. The travelers finally arrive at the port of the Kingdom of Mistmead. Tuya gives Lindsay a piggyback ride from the boat to the carriage because she experienced seasickness while in the boat. Tuya and Yumina spot Sir Lion's brooch gift on Olga's hair, and they compliment her. Suddenly, Tuya and Kohaku spot someone watching them invincibly. He says he will keep an eye out for the observer. While on their way, Olga calculates they would not arrive at Eid village by nightfall, so they camp in one of the forests. Tuya says the presence of Kohaku will prevent the attack of the magic beasts. At night, they notice a movement in the air and detect a dragon flying toward the Eld village. Tuya, the troops of Mistmead, and the girls minus Yumina go ahead to stop the dragon, but the dragon had already destroyed the village before their arrival. It spits out fire aggressively at Tuya. They lure the dragon out of the village and the other troops rescue the villagers. The dragon and Kohaku exchange words. Tuya and Linza attack the dragon endlessly, but it has a strong body. Yae and Elza appear to attack it, but the dragon spits fire at them. Tuya and Linza strike a plan to defeat it, using different sets of spells. They succeed, and the dragon dies immediately. Immediately, a red dragon appears in the sky and apologizes for the trouble the young dragon has caused. The dragon interacts freely with Kohaku, and it bows before Tuya after discovering he is the master of the White Monarch before it flies away. In the village, Tuya helps to heal the injured people. Lindsay uses her water magic to clear the fire, and the Miss Mead troops help restructure the damaged building. They all sleep off after working tirelessly all night. Yumina goes to meet Tuya outside and she offers him a blanket. He sleeps off on her thighs, and he screams in shock when he wakes up to find himself in that position. Yumina wins the rock paper scissors challenge between the girls for who to stay with Tuya. They come to her with different expressions. Sir Lion and Garen, the commander of the Miss Mead troop, commend Tuya and his party for killing the dragon themselves and still healing the injured villagers. They are also amazed at their generosity in distributing valuable parts of the dragon worth 12 gold coins or more. Garen questions who he really is. 2 village elders walk up to him to Tuya while standing to appreciate him for defending the village and his donation as well. They present him with a fang from the lion's teeth to help me mold a new sword or buy a new one. He's surprised that the fang is extremely light. They also present him with another blade stuck in the dragon's eye. Tuya is surprised to see the blade, and he remembers it being stuck, without seeing who was responsible. The twins and Yumina take a nap on their way to the capital of Miss Mida. Tuya lies down in the carriage and wonders about the blade. He asks Kohaku if he saw a different person during the fight, and Kohaku says he sensed 2 people behind the glove trees in the forest. Tuya wonders, and immediately, they arrive at the royal capital of Miss Mida. When they arrive at the royal palace, the king welcomes them, and thanks Tuya and his party for helping the Eld village. Princess Yumina introduces herself to the king and delivers the letter from her father, and the king feels honored to receive her. The king excitedly challenges Tuya to spar with him. At the training ground, the king gets set to defeat Tuya, but Tuya sits still, observing his arms and muscles. The king's butler comes in to meet Tuya, and informs him the king never passes on an opportunity to challenge a strong person, and urges him to give the king a good thrashing. Shortly after the challenge ensues, and Tuya immediately uses the slip magic on the king. He falls and puts a sword to his neck, showing he has won the fight. The king disagrees with him and asks them to start again without the slip magic. The duo battle against each other. The king has a no magic axle, which helps him disappear. Tuya uses the king's no magic for speed, and they both chase each other at full speed until Tuya eventually wins the challenge. The king hosts a party for his visitors, and they wear noble dresses. The girls compliment Tuya's nobleman's dress, and he does the same. He gives them a snapshot from his smartphone. The flash from his smartphone alerts the soldiers, but the king lowers their guard. Tuya tells him the smartphone is his no magic, and he's only snapping the girls. The king is impressed, and he questions if it can be printed. Tuya says yes, and he prints the girl's picture on a piece of paper using magic. The king is impressed, and he demands to get a picture taken. Tuya takes the snapshots, and he also prints them throughout the evening. Eventually he sits down on a chair along the palace, exhausted from the task. Suddenly a brown teddy bear walks up to him and signals him to follow him. Tuya follows the teddy bear to a room where a young girl sits on a chair. She introduces herself as Lean, the elder of the fairy folk, and she mentions she is 612 years old. Tuya is surprised, and he asks if the teddy bear is also a magic beast. She explains to him that she used her no magic program to make it move. She can perform the magic on any non-living thing and make it do her command. She sets a program into a chair to show Tuya her skills. Tuya, impressed by the spell, practices it in her presence. Lean feels sad that her no magic is not personal, but she gets over it. Impressed with Tuya's skills, she asks him to be her apprentice, but Tuya runs away from her speedily. On his bed he lies down weakly, and Kohaku comes to him. He expresses having a long day at the palace. The next day, Tuya decides to go outside and create a new weapon. Linza and Yumina run into him, and they follow him to the town. They see a nice-looking dress, and they try to lure Tuya into buying it, but he disagrees. In the middle of the woods, Tuya prints a picture of a gun and uses the cut pieces of the dragon's fangs to model it into a gun. It immediately models into a gun with bullets. He programs the gun to be able to shoot and also reload bullets when it finishes. He sets a program that allows the gun to change into a sword. The girls tell him they want a gun too, and he produces one for the 2 of them. They decide to go and eat the traditional dish at an inn, but Tuya notices they are being watched on their way. Kohaku spots 2 figures at the top of a tower, and Tuya uses Excel magic to appear behind them. They run away fast, but he tracks them with his smartphone and catches up with them. He recognizes them as Lapis and Cecile, the maids in the mansion. They confess to being the guardians of the princess as assigned by the king and the butler. Tuya shows them the blade from the dragon, and Lapis mentions it is from Cecile. They urge him not to tell the princess about the situation as it would blow their cover, and the princess will get angry at the king. He agrees to their wishes, and he joins Lindsay and Yumina at the inn. They eat the traditional food called curry, but they complain heavily about the spiciness. In the palace, Tuya opens the gate portal for the King of Belfast and the Duke to enter, and the King of Miss Mead welcomes him. Lean, the elder of the fairy folk, talks to her bear, and she says she will visit Belfast soon to see her apprentice and Tuya. Tuya and the girls arrive back at the mansion through the gate portal. Lame, Lapis, and Cecile are present in the room on their arrival. Lapis and Cecile run to welcome them, and they mention having missed them in the mansion. Tuya laughs and offers his present to them. Lapis silently thanks him for using the gate portal to send them in quickly. Yumina also presents Butler Lame with the gift she got for him. Tuya lies on his bed and promises himself to take a break from grand adventures for a while. He wakes up from his nap and goes for his bath, but receives a huge shock when he opens the bathroom door and finds the girls in their underwear. The girls, Elsie especially, scold him for barging in without knocking. In the garden, the Duke walks in on Tuya while trying to model a bicycle. The Duke appreciates him for his effort on the last mission and shows interest in his bicycle. Tuya completes it, and the Duke rides it excitedly while falling at intervals. The girls see him, and he builds a model for everyone. Lindsay pretends she is perfectly skilled at riding to have Tuya assist her. Elsa notices her, and she rides hers perfectly to make Tuya praise her skills, which he does. Lindsay sees this, and she jealously rides her bicycle perfectly, racing each other until the duo hits themselves and falls off. The Duke races with all the girls playfully, and he calls out to Tuya to get new materials to model a new one for Sue's size. Tuya agrees and gladly leaves the mansion to go shopping. On his way, Tuya notices a squabble between a young girl and two older guys in a dark alley. They try to injure her for pickpocketing in their base, which is attracting the guards to visit constantly. Tuya shoots them with the rubber bullets from his gun, and they fall. The young girl, Renee, thanks him for helping, but he warns her to stop the bad habit. As he turns to leave, he hears her stomach rumble from hunger, and he decides to buy her food to eat. He questions her about where she lives, but she tells him she lives on the street since her father never returned from his quest to defeat a magic beast years ago, and her mom is late. Tuya proposes she works for him and gets paid. She accepts, and they employ her as a maid in the mansion. They brief her on her job description. Cecile calls her to start work, and she follows her eagerly. Ye asks him about the materials for the bicycle, and he suddenly remembers not buying them. Tuya, Yumina, and Sue use the gate portal to travel to the kingdom of Miss Mead for shopping. On their way to the store, Yumina spots Arma, and she calls out to her. While exchanging pleasantries, Tuya notices Olga and Sir Lion going on a date. Arma and Sue run after them and tail them to a coffee shop. Tuya and Yumina follow them to the coffee shop. They convince Tuya to use his long sense spell and smartphone to see them and hear their conversations. Alma expresses her happiness to see her sister in a cheerful state. Shortly after, they both walk out of the coffee shop. Alma rushes to meet her sister, but she knocks into a strong man dressed in a hood. The man turns out to be the king of Miss Mead, the Beast Man. Tuya and Alma express their shock to see the king. They all hide behind a tree to continue peeping on Olga and Sir Lion while they sit outside. Tuya questions the king's reasons for deciding to come out disguised as a common man. The king says leaving the castle for the town assists him in clearing his head. He looks at Sir Lion and says he is not bold with the lady, and men were bolder during his own time. A loud bang in the market suddenly interrupts their discussion. Sir Lion criticizes a group of men for ganging up and scattering a seller's goods. The men come closer to Sir Lion with knives to attack, but the king and Tuya come out with masks on to protect him. They beat the men to pulps. Sir Lion recognizes Tuya, and Olga recognizes the king, but the king uses his Axel magic to disappear from their presence. Sir Lion stops Tuya and grabs him by his shoulder, but Tuya uses the opportunity to force him to confess about Olga while she stands behind him. Olga blushes from hearing his words and thanks him for choosing her. Alma runs out to hug her sister, and the other girls happily run to Tuya to celebrate his smart plan. Sir Lion looks at them happily and in disbelief. Tuya and Yumina arrive back at the mansion, and they announce their arrival. The butler welcomes them, and informs Tuya he has a guest. Lean, the elder of the fairy folk, and Charlotte, the royal mage of the royal family of Belfast, show up in the room. Tuya inquires on why they are visiting, and Lean says she is researching some things while Charlotte says she led her to the mansion, Tuya introduces her to Yumina and informs her she is older than them despite her young appearance. Elsa and Linza talk about her and say she looks haughty for a fairy, but she hears them and disturbs their conversation. Lean discusses a case similar to the magic crystal beast Tuya and his party defeated a while back. She says a crack in the sky resulted in the formation of a regenerating beast in a village in the western Mistmade which has killed a lot of people. She thinks the magic beasts are demons called Freys in history with translucent bodies. She says Charlotte told her he can use all types of null magic. Toya condemns Charlotte for blabbing, but she says she cannot lie to her teacher, or she will be punished. Lean requests Tuya's help to use the gate portal to visit the ruins of a village in Ishan. Tuya informs her he cannot travel to an unknown place, but she recommends the recall spell that lets him go through the minds of others and visualize images from their thoughts. Lean convinces Tuya to read Ye's thoughts since she is from Ishan. Ye almost disagrees, but the fairy explains she only has to release the memory she wants him to see. They perform the spell, and Tuya sees images of Ishan from Ye's memory. He uses the gate portal to send them to the kingdom of Ishan. They arrive there, and Ye expresses mixed emotions as she recognizes her homeland. Tuya asks Lean for the location of the ruins, but she claims she has no idea and only identifies them as the near Yuna ruins. Ye suggests meeting her father, and without hesitation, Lean drags her off. Elsa expresses her disapproval of being led by Lean, and Tuya confirms she does as she pleases. They reach the edge of the woods and see Odin Ye's village below. Ye answers their questions about the regions and their lords. Linza sees a woman in a palanquin pushed by two men, and she asks about it. Tuya explains they are called Kagoya, and they get paid to move people to their designations. He also answers Yumina's questions about the wooden shoes. Yae tells him he is very knowledgeable for someone who did not grow up in Ishan, but she says something still seems off about the village. The group enters Yae's family residence and the maid welcomes them. She calls out to her mother and they greet each other happily. Yae's mother informs her that her father has gone to the battlefield to fight the war against the Takeda armies that advanced several days back. The maid says there are rumors about the Kawago fortress falling very soon. Yae tells Tuya to use recall to gateport them to the battlefield, and Tuya promises Yae's mother to bring her family back safely. The party agrees to go with her, including Lean. They arrive at the top of a hill close to the battlefield. Yae charges to go, but Lean stops her and says they will get attacked easily. Tuya tracks Yae's brother and confirms his safety, but he cannot find her father. He suggests going alone and finding a good spot for them to attack and port them through the gate portal. Tuya sees the Takeda armies walking awkwardly, and he gets inquisitive about them. He uses the gate portal to enter the Kawago fortress, and he sees Yae's brother Jutaro, who immediately points a sword at him. He introduces himself as Yae's friend, and brings in Yae and the party. Jutaro hugs her tightly and asks who about the party, and she addresses them as her comrades. Tuya uses magic and his smartphone to heal all the wounded soldiers simultaneously. Jutaro explains to him about the Takeda soldiers. He says they keep rising after being killed, and Lean calls them artifacts, relics of ancient civilizations, and powerful magical items, and the best way to kill them is by destroying their masks. Tuya checks his phone for their location and finds multiple of them. He uses the multiple locations and sparkling holy lance, shining javelin spells to destroy all of them. Jutaro and the other soldiers are shocked while Yae expresses her excitement. Lord Ieyasu, the head of the Tokugawas, thanks them for saving the fortress. Yae's father expresses his surprise at Yae for being Princess Yumina's guardian. She says it's as a result of her training. Yumina introduces Tuya to the Lord as her guard and future husband. Tuya contradicts her and says he is on the fence about the situation. Tuya asks about the Takeda army, and Lord Ieyasu says they might reform their ranks and attack again. He claims the rumors circulating about the death of the Shingen are true, and the dark strategist Yamamoto Kansuke is commanding an army of the dead. Tuya suggests that the war will stop if they stop the commanding officer. Yae's father says he is holed up in a castle of his main camp, and the location has not been found. Suddenly, a young lady jumps down from the ceiling and delivers a secret letter to Lord Ieyasu. She introduces herself as Tsubaki, a servant to Kusaka, one of Takeda's 4 main generals. Lord Ieyasu reads the letter and confirms the rumors. Tsubaki says the other 4 generals are locked in a prison underground, and General Kusaka obeys Kansukai in pretense in hopes of reclaiming the clan. The letter asks for the help of the Tokugawas to free the Takeda generals from Kansukai. Lord Ieyasu says they are not under the obligation to save the Takeda plan, but will be greatly affected if they do not take any action against him. Tuya plans to go into the camp with Tsubaki and Lean using the invisibility spell. He uses recall on Tsubaki to get the camp's location. They arrive at the entrance, and Lean uses her invisibility spell on Tuya and herself. Tuya tries to enter the camp through the gate portal, but he discovers a barrier has been set to prevent magic that targets the premises. Lean fondles Tsubaki's breasts, and acts like she is Tuya, despite Tuya's disapproval of her actions. He eventually stops her, and Tsubaki blames him regardless. They finally break into the prison, and Tuya uses magic to free all 3 generals. Tuya tries to find the Kansuke, but his barrier stops him from being seen. Lean suggests they break the talisman that strengthens the barriers. One of the generals claims to know where the talisman is, and they decide to follow him with weapons. Tuya destroys the talisman, and he also uses the spell he used before to destroy the Oni masked soldiers that may surround them when they teleport. They finally teleport, and get to the residence of the Kansukai. He is surprised at the generals, and they attempt to attack him, but they get restricted by their Oyakata-sama. Kansuke controls the mind of the Oyakata-sama to attack the generals, and they are unable to strike back because he is their divine being, but Tuya stops him and says he has no affiliation with him. Kansuke shows them the immortal gem in his eye and says he cannot die as long as he has it. Tuya cuts him short and uses the Apport's spell to remove the gem from his eyes. Lean says the gem is an artifact that controls the mind of its owner, and has been using it to summon the dead. Tuya destroys the gem, and Kansukai melts into the ground. The Oyakata-sama dies too, and they pay their last respect. One of the generals describes the Niruya ruins for them to be on the sea ground in a faraway place. Lean urges Tuya to use recall with him, and she teases him about only doing recall spells with women. Yae bids farewell to her family, and Yae's father thanks Tuya for his help, saying he will never forget the debt he owes him. They teleport to the sea ground where the Niruya ruins are, and are impressed by how beautiful the sea is. The twins, Yumina and Yae, pull off their shoes to enter the sea. Tuya searches for ruins using his magic and smartphone, but he does not detect anything. He concludes the ruins may have submerged underneath the sea. The girls call out to him and propose going to Belfast to buy swimsuits for the sea. Tuya objects and says their goal is to search for the ruins, but Lean nudges him and says they can have their fun as long as they will help with the investigation. Tuya finally agrees to their demands and says they should have fun. Tuya invites members of the royal family, including workers from his mansion, to the sea. He sets up a changing tent for the girls and creates sea games for them. Tuya dives into the sea and sees the ruins of Niruya. He gets to the entrance but dives back outside because he cannot hold his breath. He asks Lean if she knows any spell that allows people to function underwater, but she tells him she never learned the spell because she was uninterested. Lean calls out to Charlotte and asks if she remembers, but she says she doesn't. She gives her punishments and wishes her brain had matured instead of her body. Kohaku suggests a plan for them to function underwater. She claims the Black Emperor who controls water is on par with her and would help them. Lean creates the summoning magic with Kohaku's spirit energy and Tuya's magic powers. Tuya summons the Black Emperor, and two conjoined animals, a large tortoise and a snake, appear to him. They mock the White Monarch Kohaku for taking a human, Tuya, as its master. Kohaku tells them he will soon be their master, and they challenge him to fight with them to determine if he is worth the title. Tuya accepts their challenge, and Lean warns him to be careful. Tuya activates an infinite slip spell on the beast, and they continue slipping for a long time. The Black Emperor finally surrenders to him and accepts him as their master. He forges a pact with them, and names them Kokuyu and Sango. Kohaku tells them to change their size to make things easy for the master, and they change their forms to little floating animals. Tuya anticipates the swimming, but Lean tells him to go and check the girls out because they have been staring at them for a long time. It is evening time, and they are all dressed up except Charlotte, who is still in her bikini as a punishment from Lean. Kokuyu and Sango give Tuya the ability to walk and breathe freely underwater while they relax on his shoulders. He walks easily toward the structure and enters the building. While inside the building, he sees an octagram linked with a magic core in its center. He connects magic with the core, and he appears in an unknown garden with beautiful flowers. A young lady walks toward him and identifies herself as Francesca, the terminal that controls the aerial garden of Babylon. Tuya stutters and asks her why she does not have underwear on. Francesca says she is dressed that way because of her duty, and would cover her body if he insists. She also mentions she doesn't mind him touching her a little, but Tuya disapproves of her motive and instructs her to cover up. Tuya inquires about the location. She answers and says they are in the floating aerial garden of Babylon, built by Professor Regina Babylon, their creator. Kokuyu tells him she is not human because there is no form of life running through her. She claims she was built as the garden's terminal, and she existed for 5,092 years. She says not all parts of her body are mechanical when Tuya asks if she's a machine, and she has biological parts created by magic, an amalgam of a machine and magical life forms. Tuya says she looks like a normal girl, but she cannot produce babies. She explains to Tuya that all parts of the garden have been reinforced by magic, and so maintenance has been on auto since she has been on standby except for emergencies. She says that Tuya coming into the garden is an emergency for her because they finally have a guest, and she recognizes him as suitably compatible to control the garden. She explains that only someone who possesses all affinities like the professor can activate the magic that leads to the garden. Tuya asks if possessing all affinities is what makes him compatible, but she says no. She tells him she found him compatible because he told her to cover up when she was in her underwear. Tuya laughs at her decision and asks how that makes him compatible. She further explains that if he had assaulted her, she would have thrown him to the surface. surfaced, and if he had done nothing by letting her remain in her underwear, she would have politely asked him to return to the surface. Tuya was surprised, and didn't expect her reason for exposing her body to be that deep. The girls are still at the beach waiting for Tuya. Linza expresses her worries, and Lean imagines everything is going fine if he is still there. Yumina asks her what is in the ruins, and she claims she is not certain. The girls argue about following her on vague information, and suddenly, the portal opens. Tuya appears and brings them into the garden. They marvel at the garden's beauty. Lean calls it the ruin of the ancient Partheno civilization, an advanced civilization that created many magic spells, magical devices, and artifacts utilizing the spell. Lean asks who Francesca is, and she teases him by calling her his new woman. He disagrees, and Francesca introduces herself as the Terminal. She also calls Tuya her husband because she has shown him her panties. The girls express their anger towards him, and Lindsay especially attacks him. Lean tells her Tuya is not at fault because they have not made their stand clear towards him like Yumina. They all go mute, and Yumina suggests they leave Tuya and Lean to discuss the situation while they take a walk around the garden. During their walk, the girls get bothered about Tuya and Lean, but Yumina assures them nothing is happening. She suddenly stops them and asks about the proposal she made to them on the day they moved into the mansion. They flash back to their discussion about Tuya. She questioned them if they loved him, but they were uncertain at the time. They all had something to say about Tuya being nice and soft-hearted. She also mentioned she knew Tuya would need comrades who trust and support him always, and she cannot defend him alone. She said she accepted them in Tuya's life. She asked if they would all love to become his bride, and they all went speechless. So she shelved the discussion until she knew their feelings were more settled. Back in the garden, Yumina makes them understand they now have feelings for Tuya with all their actions, and they agree. She asks them the same question about being his bride, and they all disagree with it after imagining the scenario. She says they are not ready for the discussion yet again, and she shelves it. Tuya asks Lean if she has discovered what she was seeking, and she says she has found even better. A garden that has withstood 5,000 plus years without any flower withering is an array of ancient magic that is better than the mild spell she seeks to find. Tuya says the professor who built the garden is a genius, but she has a perverted sense for programming the terminal to expose itself. Tuya asks Cheska if there's anything else attached to the garden. She responds and says the garden has no treasure or weapon, unlike the others, and it is just as it is. She offers herself and the garden as a dowry for their marriage. Tuya disapproves of her decisions. Lean asks her what the others are, and she mentions there are other drifting areas in different locations, managed by her sisters, and they all together complete Babylon. Tuya reacts shocked at the information. Lean clarifies the information that Babylon, the Professor Babylon created, is split into different parts and is floating above the world. Yumina and the other girls walk in, and she declares that a floating island like that may cause commotion. Tuya sees their faces all red, and he questions if they are okay. They respond they are okay despite their looks, and he is only imagining it. Zisa says the floating islands have barriers that protect them from being seen from the surface. Cheska tells them about the 9 other floating islands. She mentions a library, laboratory, storage facility, tower, castle walls, workshop, the alchemy ward, and the granary. Lean takes a special interest in the library, and she asks Cheska for a way to connect to the other islands. She says her connection with her other sisters is severed, and there is no way to reach them. Linza suggests they use Tuya's smartphone, and he tries it out, but it does not locate the islands. Lean suggests the only way to go into the island is to use the teleportation circle, but Cheska claims she doesn't have the circles for the other islands. Tuya asks Cheska where she would like to be, and she replies that she would like to be with Tuya, her master, in bed and bath. The girls look at Tuya, and he explains to them that she doesn't mean it. He says there is no option but to take her with him since she would be in the garden alone. Cheska registers Tuya as the new owner of the Guardian by kissing him and mixing their saliva to create genetic coordination. They all arrive back at the mansion, and Tuya hands over Cheska to Butler Lime. She mutters words to herself and says she can take care of herself. Yumina stares at her confusedly. Tuya lies on his bed, remembering Linza's confession to him in the garden. Yumina knocks on his door, and she comes in. She blasts her anger at him for allowing other girls to kiss him before her. Tuya is surprised that's the course of her anger, and not because Linza confessed. She mentions that Linza loves him, and that's why she confessed she is not against that, and he can have up to 10 wives. She makes him hug and kiss her. She proceeds to ask him how he feels for Linza, and he says he likes and cherishes her, and was happy when she confessed. But he is still unsure about his decision with Linza, just as he is unsure about her. Yumina calls out to Linza, and she waves off her invisibility magic. Tuya is surprised, and he asks their reason. Yumina says Lindsay was crying because she thought he didn't like her when he refused to give her a response, so she came to clarify, and Lean helped her with the invisibility spell. Tuya apologizes for not replying to her, and she also apologizes for not considering his feelings. Tuya confesses to her again that he thinks she is cute, and he likes her. Yumina asks Linza if she would also like to marry him, and she says yes. Tuya, in a choiceless state, agrees to their decision, and says as long as they are comfortable. Yumina is excited that Linza is also a fiancé like her. Tuya tells them to go to their rooms. Yumina asks for a goodnight kiss, and he gives them both on their foreheads. The next morning, Elsa wakes him up from bed with a loud bang. She instructs him to follow her outside, and he also meets an angry Ye waiting for him. Elsa asks if he truly loves her sister for proposing marriage to her. He says he cherishes her, but he is not certain about love. They challenge him to a fight, and tell him they have a request if they win. Ye and Elsa fight with him intensely, and they win the battle by knocking him out. When he wakes up, they tell him to put them in the same position as Linza and Yumina. They both claim they love him as much as the others love him. Tuya is surprised they had a challenge for this purpose. Yumina comes out and says she advised them to do things like that. She mentions she had earlier proposed they all become his wives. Tuya says she is a scary person for making that decision, and he demands time to think over their requests. Tuya sits in the aerial garden to think about the situation. Cheska walks in and asks what is bothering him. He says he doesn't know if he can make all of them happy without one of them feeling dissatisfied, and he does not know how to perform his duties as a husband. Cheska remembers and informs him he has a message from Professor Babylon. She opens a small part of her hands and brings out a USB cable. Tuya questions its purpose, and Cheska says the professor mentioned that he will know what to do. He inserts it into his phone's port, and a hologram video of the professor is displayed on his smartphone. She sits in a chair, and she first makes underwear jokes to Tuya. He decides to unplug the USB if she persists, but she stops him. She explains that she has a tool that can let her see the future, and that is why she made the mock video conversation based on his future responses. She says there was a time she was unable to see the future because of the presence of the phrase on the planet, and she thought the world would be destroyed. But suddenly she realized the phrase had disappeared and the world was safe, so she could see again. She jokes and says she likes entertainment and has been watching his little dispute with his women. He tells her to stop viewing them, but she says she has entrusted Babylon to his care so he can use it as much as he wants. He asks a question about his current situation with his women, but she refuses to say anything, and she urges him to continue his experience. She closes the message and jokes by saying Francesca will go naked after the video. In the next scene, Tuya teleports to meet the Supreme Being, and he is surprised it works. Tuya asks for the Supreme Being's advice, and he says he should let it flow. Tuya says he has gotten the same advice from somewhere else, but he does not feel fulfilled. The Supreme Being invites the Divine Being of Love to the conversation to help give a more professional answer. She advises him to give all four of them the desired love since they love each other, and she advises him to be selfish with his love. She also tells him she was responsible for the bathroom incident where he entered and saw them in their underwear by mistake. Tuya is back in his mansion, and he instructs Kohaku to call the four girls. When they arrive, he explains his intention to marry all of them, but in the future. He says he is still young and cannot take responsibility for another's life, so he urges them to understand, and he says if anyone loses interest in him along the way, they can fall back. Linza teases her sister and tells Taoyo she won't cast him away even if her sister does. Yumina is excited that they are all his fiancés, and she proposes their husband gives all of them a kiss. Yae and Elsa get shy, and they stutter with their words, claiming it's too early for the kiss. Yumina and Lindsay inform them they received kisses on their foreheads the night before, so they finally agree. Tuya tries to kiss Elsa, but she pushes him away and says it is too embarrassing. Linza sighs at her sister's attitude. Lean, Charlotte, and Francesca observe them from the windows. Lean tells Charlotte to get her work done, but she begs to observe the fun. Francesca tells them the professor informed her he would marry 9 wives in total. She asks Lean if she is one of them, and she smiles. The season opens with Tuya, the twins, Yae, and Yumina on a mission to defeat 2 mithril golems operating with a black core. Yae attempts to attack them with her sword, but they have stony body parts. Tuya uses his gate portal to teleport them 10,000 feet into the sky, and they return and land on the ground with force and a heavy bang. Elsa and Yumina attack the golems' weak bodies with magic, targeting their core and defeating them. They succeed in their quest, and return home using the gate portal to teleport themselves. Ren and Cecile spot Tuya and his party as they enter the mansion, and they run to welcome them. Tuya shows Rennie the red card he received for his promotion to a first-rate adventurer, and for the others as well. While Cecile announces that she has prepared his bath, Ren checks the party and notices Cheska's absence, so she asks Tuya. Tuya suddenly remembers her being in the garden, and he mentions that he forgot her. Cheska serves Toya and Lean tea at the balcony's chair set, and says repeatedly with a pained expression, "The that she is not bothered about being forgotten by her master. She implies she has learned that Tuya has an abandonment fetish. Tuya refutes her statement abruptly, claiming he does not have a fetish, and regrets leaving her behind. He mentions that using gate to teleport is a habit for him. Lean stops her from bugging him further and says he truly regrets it, and would certainly abandon her if she persists. She makes a joke about Tuya buying her naughty underwear of his choice to seek her forgiveness, but Tuya objects, and says he would not purchase any sort of underwear. She replies to him with a stern face that she is joking. Tuya queries Lean on her purpose for seeking him, and she responds that she intends to search for the teleportation circles for the remaining parts of Babylon. Tuya is surprised she is bringing up the conversation, and he says he has no reason to search for the parts, so he is uninterested in the search. Lean scolds him for not showing interest in ancient knowledge or lost technology. He says Professor Babylon mentioned their present era does not require very strong power. Tuya finally decides to help her if she has valid information on the teleportation circle. He sees a call from the Supreme Being on his phone, and he teleports to meet him. He meets the Supreme Being along with the Divine Being of Love. The Supreme Being says he called him to know how he is faring, and Tuya thanks him for resurrecting him because he is having a good time, and his phone has been of great help. The Divine Being of Love sneaks up behind Tuya with cookies in her mouth, and mumbles some words. Tuya replies and says having pictures of his fiancées, as his wallpaper will be embarrassing when he misplaces his smartphone. The Supreme Being is surprised Tuya understands her mumbling. She says laughing and blushing over a loved one's picture is one of the pleasures of love. Tuya tells her he is not interested in doing that, but she contradicts him by saying she caught him blushing when he got the engagement rings for his fiancée. The Divine Being of Love tells him she made the rings fit into their fingers perfectly. Tuya is surprised she and the Supreme Being were watching him at the time, and he blames them for having too much time on their hands. Ya, Yumina, and the twins discuss Tuya while in the bath. Elsa admires her engagement ring, and Yumina says it does make her happy whenever she sees it. Linza confirms the rings are enchanted with magic spells, and it helped during their extermination quest earlier in the day. Yumina says Tuya is too soft-hearted and powerful, therefore, people may want to use him for his powers. She confidently mentions that she is not bothered about such people, because she can detect their intentions with her mystic eyes, but she is bothered about the harm that may come from people with good intentions. She explains that people may manipulate a woman who loves Tuya into demanding things from him, and he will put himself in harm's way to save the people he loves. She is bothered that the woman might be his fiancée as well. She tells them Tuya might come to have more fiancées, and they should always support him. The girls express shock, but they agree to do their best for Tuya. Ye and Tuya visit her father's house to request a new mithril sword for her. On their way back, Ye stutters, asks Tuya to spend time with her, and holds hands while on their way. He is embarrassed at first, but he succumbs to her desires eventually. Tuya and Yumina go to the king's palace to announce her engagement to her parents, and they relate their excitement to the news. The king informs Tuya that marrying 4 women will be tough. Tuya agrees and says he is not getting married until he is 18. The king urges them to have grandchildren, but Yumina kicks him to stop him from discussing children. The queen advises Tuya to be prepared for enemies and nobles who have requested Yumina's hands. Yumina and Tuya return to the palace, and he asks her if he would be king if they get married, but she says it is not certain yet, and the announcement has been delayed until they are very sure. He thinks about making an accomplishment that would be of great benefit to the nation according to the queen. Tuya visits Micah and her husband in the Silver Moon Inn, and Micah complains they have been low on customers. He decides to modify the inn to attract more customers, so he uses magic to set up a hot spring bath. Micah is overjoyed. Tuya calls out the girls and workers in the mansion to test out the female bath. While in the changing room, the girls praise Tuya for creating the hot spring for Micah. Yumina knows the girls intend to show off their freshness to Tuya after their bath, and she teases them. She then asks them when they realized they were in love with him. Elsa says since the first day he met her, he has always considered her as a woman, and he even got her a dress, so she loved how he saw her. Linza says she gets shy when speaking to men, but with Tuya, she was comfortable, especially when he was taking the magic lessons. She sometimes minced words, but he did not complain. Ye says she has always known Tuya's true nature. Yumina tells her own story again about her love being a love at first sight. They suddenly hear Cheska's voice calling out to Tuya, but she gets shocked when she tries going over the wall to the male bath. Suddenly Lean enters without caring about the men's nakedness, and she announces she has found one of the ruins of Babylon. Tuya, his fiancé's Cheska, and the magic animals gather in the garden to watch Lean's display of the location of the ruin of Babylon. Lean says the ruin of Babylon is located south of Mizmead, past the sea trees of the burning kingdom of Sandora, and they will proceed to the Rabbi Desert. She claims that the 6th pillar embedded with spellstone were reported to lie within the ancient ruins in the desert, and the ruins have been swallowed up by the desert. She notices Tuya's lack of interest in the conversation, and she reminds him of her intentions. If he doesn't fulfill his promise. Tuya thinks within himself that they do not need to stress much about it, but he is interested in the extermination and why the ancient ruins are in the hands of the Freys. He claims they may need the power of Babylon one day, and he could regret not possessing it then. Jessica shows him a display on the screen where a Freys is chasing some group of people. They decide to go help them. They arrive at the desert and they block the Freys' outpour on the people. Elsa saves the people and hides then behind the rock. Ye goes on top of the Freys and tries to attack it with her sword, but it is unaffected. She jumps back to the ground and they all hide separately when the Freys attack them with a blast. Suddenly, a young man appears in Talia's. Ende appears in Tuya's presence. He says he tailed the Freys to the location and did not expect to see Tuya and his party. He expresses his surprise at a standard phase surviving the Earth, and he claims the world's barrier is at its limit. Tuya is shocked by the information. Ende goes on to attack the Freys, and he does it easily. He uses a magic attuned to its natural frequency to shatter the Freys into pieces, and he destroys its core. Tuya asks about the world barrier, and he tells him it is a net that keeps foreign things from the world, but it is beginning to fray, so different elements are slipping through. Ende bids his farewell to Tuya and says he is going to hunt for the Freys' king. The leader of the group introduces herself as Rebecca and says she and her partner are adventurers that rescued the girls with them from enslavement. Rebecca says the girls have enslavement collars on their necks which restrict them from defying orders from anyone, and the collar can only be removed by the one who placed it, but unfortunately he is head. She says they are trying to get them out of the country to get the collars removed, but they got lost and stranded on their way, and the Freys attacked them. Tuya helps them remove the collar individually using Apport's spell. Rebecca thanks him, and she says they still need to leave the country because names are still on the slave record. Yumina enters the discussion and introduces herself as the daughter of the King of Belfast. She suggests they can relocate to Belfast if they wish to, and Rebecca kneels down in appreciation of her kind gesture, and she accepts the offer. Tuya uses the gate portal to teleport them to the mansion. They all return back to the garden to continue their adventure. Lean questions Tuya about Ende. Tuya responds and says he met him at the shop where he purchased the engagement rings a few days back. Ende was trying to pay for the things he purchased with a coin, but the shopkeeper rejected the coin, so Tuya paid for him. He also asked Tuya about getting a job, and Tuya referred him to the guild. Tuya shows Lean the coin, but Cheska recognizes it as the Partheno silver coin that was first minted about 5,284 years ago. Yumina surprisingly says the coin looks like it was recently. Lean tells them Ende exudes suspicion with how he defeated the Freys that proved difficult for them and the Patherno coin he possesses. Elsa questions Tuya about the Freys, and Yumina asks him to tell them about it. Tuya explains to them the message he got from the professor. She can see the future with a machine, and he tells them the story of the Freys that invaded the world and destroyed Patherno. The professor mentioned she was surprised when she realized the world was not destroyed according to her prediction, and the Freys were defeated and sent away. Tuya questions Cheska if humans fought with the Freys 5,000 years ago. She says they did not get a chance to fight, even though the professor produced decisive weapons to destroy the Freys, but they were all gone before the weapons were completed. Tuya asks about the decisive weapons, and she explains that the professor created frame gears, pilotable humanoid combat weapons, and were stored in the hangar of Babylon. Tuya gets excited about the weapons and anticipates going to the ruins. Cheska informs him they have arrived at the ruin of Babylon. They land in the desert, and Lean uses her wind spell to blow sand away from the ruins. Tuya goes inside the ruin and finds another teleportation circle like before. He appears in another garden, and the garden's terminal comes in to introduce herself as Rosetta. Rosetta says the garden is the workshop of Babylon, and he gets disappointed. She tells him the workshop hub is at the back of the garden, but only a compatible person can have access. Tuya informs him she's already compatible with Cheska. Rosetta says it would make the compatibility process easier. She asks him to guess the color of her underwear, and Tuya angrily responds. He uses wind and fire magic on her skirt, but it does not affect her skirt because it is magic resistant. He uses his long sense spell to peep, but finds out she has no underwear. He dejectedly tells her it is colorless, and she accepts him as her master. She kisses him to register him as the new owner and transfer his genetic record. They appear at the workshop, and she uses her fingerprint to open the hub. Rosetta explains the workshop is an all-purpose workshop that can create any manufacturing apparatus of one's choice, as long as the materials are available. He mentions he may not have much need for the workshop since he uses the modeling spell, but it can be efficient for bulk production. Tuya reproduces his gun using mithril, and Rosetta says she can make effects on the the model, and the machine can produce as many copies as he inputs. He asks her about the frame gears, and she mentions it was produced in the workspace by herself and the professor. He questions if she can produce a new one, and she says she can only produce the equipment but not the actual machine because she does not possess the blueprint which is in the storehouse. Tuya brings everyone into the workshop through the gate portal. Lean is disappointed about the workshop. Tuya informs the administrators they will return to Belfast with the garden and the workshop. Rosetta says she has lessened the workshop's barrier, so it will be easy to move from the garden. They arrive at the mansion, and Tuya meets Rebecca and her two partners. They apologize for not showing him enough courtesy as Princess Yumina's fiancé, but he objects. They request he allow the girls to stay with them until they can work since they have no special powers while they work at the guild. Tuya accepts their requests. After considering making them mass-produce in the workshop, but he rethinks making the workshop a secret and employing a professional for the job. Tuya opens a new cafe in the street with a library where customers read freely while they eat. He employs the girls as his staff, and the cafe is booming with customers. He recalls using the workshop to mass-produce bicycles, and he sells them to a merchant who buys them at very quality prices. Rebecca and her party also engage themselves in protecting the cafe. A young boy on Rebecca's team envies Tuya for using his magic to build the furniture for the library effectively. He says his grandfather had a null magic of gravity, but is sad because he has no aptitude. Yumina and Tuya visit the guild to take up a new quest. Yumina shows her excitement about going on an extermination date with Tuya. They select a quest to defeat a giant bloody crab with a very hard shell and 4 pincers. Yumina tells him the crab's body can be used to produce weapon equipment, and its body can be eaten as meat. At the counter, the receptionist notices that Tuya is the owner of the new library cafe, Moonreader. She requests he add a specific book to his collection, and he accepts. On their way home, Tuya talks about her happiness about the books. Yumina cuts in and tells him about the after noticing his oblivion. She says the book is about a romance story between some knights within the order, and they are all men. Tuya is surprised, and he asks if it is the book Linza has been insistent on buying, and she affirms it. Yumina says she knows so much about the book series because she knows the writer. She says the writer is famous, but she goes under the pen name Riel Refris because she does not want to be identified. She leaks her identity to Tuya as the first princess of the Refris Imperium, Prince Reliel Ren Refris. She says she has known her for a long time, and she's writing books with that storyline because of her interest in them. Tuya's head spins with the information, and he asks them to go and exterminate the bloody crab. They get to the location, and are shocked about how gigantic the crab is. They attack the crab, and Tuya uses gravity, the spell he got from the young boy at the cafe, to double the crab's weight, so it is unable to move. They defeat the crab, and Yumina's rank increases from using a blue card to a red card. Tuya asks the receptionist before leaving to list the number of books she would like him to get for the library catalog. She runs off excitedly to meet the other receptionists, and they tell her their preferences. She returns to Tuya with a long list, and he collects it in shock. Tuya asks Yumina to share her memory of Bern, the capital of Refries, so he can get the collections, and she agrees. At the bookstore in Bern, Tuya gives the receptionist his list, and she goes to fetch them while looking at him with filthy eyes. While Tuya checks out other books to add to the library, a young lady visits the store and asks to purchase the last volume of a book series. The receptionist tells her the last copy has been purchased by Tuya, and she cries in pain. Tuya arrives back at the counter, and she tries to cajole him into giving her the last copy. She tells him she will give him a free autograph on the Order of the Rose series. Tuya thinks she's trying to pull off a blackmail, so he mentions the real writer of the book. The lady blabbers in shock about her secret being revealed, and Tuya knocks her after realizing she is the real princess. He explains that he got the information through Yumina, and he introduces himself as her fiancé. She starts blabbering about it being a sham marriage, but he knocks her for the second time and uses the gate portal to bring Yumina in to confirm her doubt. He offers her a new copy of the book he produced from the factory, and assures her he paid them enough in the bookstore to cover an extra book. The receptionists storm the cafe to read their different collections of books. People request books as well. Tuya meets Will, the young boy who taught him the gravity spell, and he thanks him. He asks him what he wants and what he would like to do. Will stated his wish to be strong so he can protect someone he likes, one of the girls at the cafe, and would love to protect her. Tuya connects the dots, and he takes him to the night training school at the Belfast Palace. He hands him over to the captain, and he agrees to take full responsibility for him. He spots Elsa coming out of the training ground, and he explains the purpose of his visit. She proposes they go to the Silver Moon Inn as she would love a spring bath in the inn. They arrive at the inn, and Elsa uses the shower, while Tuya discusses with Micah. He asks her about the progress of the inn, and she replies to him vivaciously. She reports they have made huge progress, and they get a pool of customers such that they derive profits from the bathhouse more. The fashion designer who exchanged Tuya's suit in the beginning, Zanik-san, walks into the inn, and they exchange pleasantries. Micah says he is a regular customer of the bathhouse, and he has recommended the hot spring bath to his customers at Fashion Zanak. Zanak informs Tuya of his new design prototype that he made from Tuya's outfit ideas. Tuya buys the dress for Elsa, and she looks beautiful in it. Tuya compliments her, but she feels awkward in the dress, and she queries why Tuya changed her dress without her permission. He introspects and says that she loves cute dresses but would never wear them because she feels they won't fit her, hence why he forced them on her. She almost slips while in her heels, but Tuya supports her. She eventually thanks Tuya for the present with love. Yumina and Tuya are sitting and having tea outside the house when Linza walks in with a new book series, Riel Refries's new series. The series defames Tuya's name, and says he is a powerful man who intends to take over the kingdom and marry the king's daughter. She claims she had a sudden inspiration, and people are talking about the pace at which she is writing the book. Tuya angrily wishes to knock her if he sees her again. Tuya approaches Lindsay while she reads in a corridor at the cafe. He informs her he is off to fetch new books in the Regulus Empire, and he got the memory of the location from Lapis through the recall spell. He asks her what she will be doing after, and she tells him she will be reading. Tuya is surprised, and he advises her not to be too engrossed in the books. He sets off to the Empire. Upon his arrival at the Regulus Empire, he meets commotion in the streets with people running helter-skelter and houses getting burnt. He saves a man from attack by 2 soldiers, and the man explains there is an uprising ongoing in the Empire. Tuya runs to find the Emperor and plans to save them by teleporting them out of the Empire. When he arrives at the palace, he tries searching for the princess using his phone, and he locates her. The princess is under attack by a soldier, and he is about to stab her when Tuya stops him. The blade scratches her body, and he heals her. Just as he tries to calm the princess, a uniformed lady walks in with 2 blades in her arms, about to attack Tuya. But the princess introduces him to her as her savior. Tuya introduces himself as an adventurer from Belfast who used teleportation magic to travel to Regulus for the purchase of supplies, but he met with commotion instead. The lady introduces herself as Carol, a knight of the Empire's Third Order, and she begs Tuya to use his teleportation magic to teleport the Emperor, Prince, and Princess to safety. The princess uses the opportunity to introduce herself as Lucia, the 3rd princess of the Empire. Tuya decides to teleport the princess to safety first, but she disagrees, saying they need to rescue her father and brother. When they enter the Emperor's chambers, they see him on the floor, looking lifeless. A man turns his back, and Carol recognizes him to be one of their generals, Bazawar. Tuya asks his reason for attacking the Emperor so he can decide the side he wishes to pick. The general explains that the Emperor is mentally ill, and it is the best time to break the non-aggression treaty they signed with Belfast and start a war, but he declines the option. Tuya replies to him angrily, and reminds him that Belfast has an alliance with Mistmead and Refreeze, and asks if he will be able to defeat all 3 nations. The general replies and says they have not been spending the 20 years twiddling their thumbs after they signed the treaty. He immediately summons a demon with dark magic, and Tuya questions his magical capacity. A very large devil appears, and Tuya questions how he managed to make a pact with the devil. The general told him he made sacrifices to him with the lives of the criminals detained in the capital city. Tuya questions how he got his powerful magic power, and he shows him the bracelet of absorption on his hand that absorbs people's magic power. Tuya mentions that's why he has been feeling sluggish. He tries to extract his bracelet with the apport spell, but the magic reverts. The general says the devil has the power to nullify magic attacks, and the power exudes over him, who forged the pact with him. Tuya tries to attack him with his gun, but it bounces back. He showed him his bulwark bracelet that protects him from physical attack. Tuya realizes he is a strong competitor, so he uses the gate portal to teleport the Emperor, Princess, and Carol, and he promises the general he will return for him. Before leaving, he casts the slip spell on the ground, and the general slips repeatedly. He also uses an illusion spell on him, which allows him to see worms on his arm. Tuya, the twins, and Ye discuss the attack, and Elsie says Tuya will always stick his neck in trouble. Ye gets worried about the devil and their plan to attack Belfast. In the room, Princess Lucia kneels beside her father, who is lying on the bed. Tuya assures her he will be fine and he just needs rest. Yumina enters and introduces herself while the princess does the same. She says Tuya rescued and saved her while she was in trouble. Yumina says proudly that is why he is her fiancé. Lucia's face lit up in disappointment at her words. Tuya leaves to report the situation in the Empire to the king. Tuya explains the situation to the king, and the king expresses his mixed feelings about the news. The king says he received good news earlier, that he is expecting a child. The king urges Tuya to proceed with his plan of defeating General Bazawar, and he apologizes for putting the burden on him. Tuya visits the workshop and discusses with Rosetta about the artifacts. She says they were kept in the storehouse, He also asks about the immortal gem that Konsukai used to control the Takeda's army, and she says it was also present there, and must have been leaked out since the administrator of the storehouse is a careless, clumsy woman. Later at night, Tuya visits the emperor and discovers he is awake. The king says the uprising has brought about his weakness, and he will devise a plan to defeat him soon. Tuya informs the emperor they can reclaim the empire in the morning. Lucia begs him to find her brother before he proceeds. Toya uses recall with Lucia to determine her brother's face, and he recognizes him as the man he saved and hid when he visited the city. Tuya uses the search spell to locate the prince, and they find out he is in the house of one of the generals. They confirm his safety. The king asks Tuya if reclaiming the city in the morning is a wise choice, since they'll be fighting against 10,000 soldiers and a devil. Tuya says he can manage, and he has his allies with him. Tuya devises a plan, and he gives everyone instructions to follow. During the attack, they all follow his plan. Tuya defeats the demon by hitting his head with a gravity sword he has spelled with magic. He moves to the general and teleports him into his tempered glass storage box, where he has a dead sludge slime. He informs him the dead sludge will emit a foul odor that can kill, and the general dies in the storage. The next day, Tuya helps the emperor display a large screen recording in the town, where he explains the situation of the empire and assures the citizens they are now safe. Tuya returns to the garden, and the girls welcome him. They sense a smell coming from him, and he says he got it from touching the general while retrieving the bracelets. They tease him about enjoying the odor from the slime, and he defends himself against their accusation. The emperor and the king of Belfast sit together in a room, alongside Tuya and their daughters. The emperor thanks Tuya for saving their lives, and he tells him to ask for whatever he desires. Tuya, humbly as always, tells the emperor not to bother, as he was only there coincidentally. The king of Belfast laughs and commends Tuya for still maintaining his humility. He tells the emperor he also offered him a title which he rejected, and getting him to marry Yumina took a lot of hassle. The emperor asks if he would also take Lucia as his fiancée in the case. Yumina cuts in and says her opinion on the matter. She mentions that she has read through Lucia's mind, and she recognizes her interest in Tuya, and is willing to accept her as his fiancée. She also said she has discussed it with the other fiancés, and they have agreed with her. The king asks Lucia if that is her true desire, and she agrees. In all of this, Tuya looks dumbfounded and speechless, without having an opinion of his own on the matter. The two rulers shake their hands at their newly formed alliance. The other fiancés share Lucia's happiness with her on becoming Tuya's wife-to-be. Sir Lion explains to Tuya that his power is what makes him special. If he is serving just one nation, he would be a threat to the others, and it could sway the balance between nations if they don't form alliances with him. The king suggests they announce the engagement of the two princesses to the public both at home and abroad, but they have to work on his status. They cede lands from the Regulus and Belfast kingdom to him, and they make him the monarch ruler of the land, to give him a befitting status as the fiancé of two princesses. Tuya thinks within himself and considers the benefit of the status and lands, although he thinks the gesture is too much. Tuya sits down with Ye and the twins, and they talk about his newly acquired title. They tell him about how proud they are of him for his new title. He names his new country Brunhild, and Linza asks if they will relocate there. Tuya says he has not considered it, but Ye tells him they have to move. Elsa explains to him that Regulus might think he is in favor of Belfast if he stays in Belfast. Tuya agrees with her point, and they decide to build a new mansion there, and leave their current mansion in Belfast as the base of operations. They seek Lucia's opinion on the type of home she would like, and she mentions a castle. They all agree with her opinion, and Rosetta appears. She says the castle can be built in 3 days if they have a design and the materials. She mentions all the building materials, and Tuya screams in shock. He says they cannot get the materials. Lucia suggests they use materials from an abandoned castle, since they will rebuild everything from the start. 3 days later, Tuya and his fiancé visit the new house, and they express how impressive it is. They all run inside to observe the interior. Tuya spots Lean and her teddy bear, Paula, standing behind him. They enter and Lean tells him she needs a place to stay since she is Miss Mead's new ambassador for his kingdom. Tuya is surprised because he knows she was the ambassador for Belfast. Lean replies that she has dumped the role on someone there, and she has more fun working with them. Tuya creates a path in the building where the gate portal works for anyone who has access, and it records who uses it. He places the key on the wall, and Rene sees him. They both try it out, and Rene teleports to the Belfast mansion. She delivers a letter to him from the king of Belfast. Tuya arrives at the palace, and he meets the emperor of the Refreeze Imperium. The king extends an alliance to Tuya and says he would have loved to seal his alliance with his daughter's hand in marriage, but she already has a partner. Tuya remembers her and rejects him instantly. They propose going to his castle instead. Tuya expresses his surprise and asks why the rulers of the great nations intend to visit his castle. They answer him simultaneously that even kings humans have the right to relax and let loose. Tuya sighs and says to himself that it will be a busy day for them. Tuya and the girls set up a dinner area for the rulers and create fun and sports games like bowling, ping pong, tennis, and the like for them. While practicing the games, Cecile informs Tuya that he has a visitor. Tuya's visitor appears to be Tsubaki, the emissary from Takeda. She informs Tuya that the Takeda clan has ended, and she has come to the Brunhild to serve Tuya as her new master. Tuya is shocked at the news. She tells him the new lord made living unbearable in Takeda for the people, and the generals took the land from him after the Kusaka admonished him, but he refused to listen. The people have decided to come and serve him, and they are waiting outside the castle gates for his decision. Tuya says it is not a problem, but he cannot provide jobs for all of them. Tsubaki assures him they are skilled, and they have their side jobs. Tuya meets 3 of the generals outside the gate, and they thank him for extending his hands. Tuya says he needs more allies, and they tell him to leave wars and security to them. They are impressed by how much he has grown to the extent of owning a kingdom. He asks for General Kusaka, and they give him his location. General Kusaka and Tuya discuss the necessary structures to be put in place to attract merchants for the new citizens of Brunhild to make a living. He proposes highways for travelers, and Tuya creates pathways. Tuya proposes the creation of cafes, inns, and restaurants for travelers to rest when they are passing by. He creates everything, and the town starts to take form. While he stands on the streets observing, Lucia calls out to him. She brings lunch for him after noticing he must have had nothing to eat. Tuya eats the food with love, and commends her for making the Ishan dish deliciously, despite it being her first time. The monarchs from the different nations and their entourages visit Tuya's house, and they dine and play games together. Sir Lion says he is truly impressed at Tuya for bringing the monarchs of the western states together, which he never imagined before. Tuya invites his guests outside at night to see the fireworks, and they are greatly impressed by the sight. Cheska and Rosetta are responsible for creating the fireworks, and they throw them down from the workshop. Lucia walks up to Tuya and thanks him for giving her a chance. She claims to have learned a lot of things for the first time. He gives her an engagement ring, and he apologizes for not giving her earlier. Some traveling merchants of Elfrau discover a mysterious object frozen in ice on their way, and the information gets to Lean. She assembles the Tuya and the girls to assist in detecting the object, and investigate if it has a teleportation circle. The twins search through the object, but they can't detect an entrance. Tuya stands tall on it, and he detects an entrance. He enters and finds a teleportation circle, which takes him to another drifting Babylon. He meets the terminal, and she introduces herself as Flora, and the place is the alchemy ward. He knows the system, and he tells her he has acquired the garden and workshop. She expresses her excitement after hearing about Francesca and Rosetta. However, she says she needs to decide if he is truly compatible, and she kisses him to register his genetic information and transfers ownership of the ward to him. She informs Tuya that he passed the compatibility test. Tuya's face turns red with embarrassment, and says the professor was not in her right state when she created all of them. She leads him to the alchemy ward and explains that potions of different types can be produced there, and healings of all sorts including growing arms and legs can be performed. She shows him some of the medications in the collection that are all sexually related, and he expresses his disappointment after first commending the ward. Lean is disappointed after she realizes it is the alchemy ward, not the library. She says it will be beneficial to Tuya, the Grand Duke of the Duchy of Brunhild as he calls himself. At the castle, Tuya sits in his library, and Rene reports the arrival of new books. He finds a magic spell that allows people to fly, which he has been searching for. He practices the spell, and gets the hang of it gradually, until he becomes perfect, and loops several times. He eventually returns and relaxes on Elsa's legs after feeling nauseous from getting carried away by the experience. She asks him if he can use the flight on her, but he says it is impossible because it is not a manipulation spell. Then he tries the levitation spell which he discovered in the spellbook. He uses the levitation spell to lift her to his level, and uses the fly spell to make them fly back into the house. Elsa is ecstatic about her ability to fly at the moment. Tuya feels fulfilled, and he says they can use the spell to level up with flying monsters and defeat them. Tuya flies over his new city, and he is impressed by the work that has been done there. A group of people walking down sight him, and they call out to him. He stops to respond to their hailings. He says to himself that he needs to start developing his knights, and that's why he contacted interested people. Tuya turns to leave, and he suddenly receives a call from the Supreme Being, but he hears the voice of the Divine Being of Love instead. She says she has picked up a love antenna between him and his fiancées now that he is done setting up his city and selecting his knights. Tuya tells her to stop crying, but she says she cannot help it, and she advises him to introduce himself to Yae and the twins' parents formally. At the residence of Yae's parents, Tuya seeks Yae's hands in marriage, and her parents agree without hassle. Yae's father hopes Tuya will take care of his daughter like his other fiancés, and he bows to him. Tuya, while in shock, thanks her father, and says he was expecting a disapproving statement from him that will require defeating him to get his daughter's hand. Yae raises her unsheathed sword in defense of Tuya, and mentions that she will be her father's opponent instead, because she cannot afford Tuya, her most precious, to get armed. Yae's father father stays silent until her mother speaks about how much Ye loves him, and it is enough for them to agree. Ye's father acknowledges her statement, and he accepts with tears dropping down his eyes. Tuya visits the twins' family residence, and he is surprised at their uncle's greetings towards Tuya. He bows and apologizes deeply for not providing adequate hospitality. His daughter runs out to defend him, and she explains that he had an occurrence when he was a child, and since then, always gets weak in the presence of nobility or high status. The twins' auntie says Tuya is a very humble monarch, and it is no wonder the girls have chosen him. A young boy appears and asks if Tuya is a strong monarch who can easily defeat the Thunder Bears. Tuya asks about the Thunder Bears and they mention it being in the neighborhood. He delivers a large number of the dead Thunder Bears to the guild. While Tuya sits at the guild, waiting for information from the receptionist, Endi walks up to him, and Tuya asks about the phrase. Endi explains that the phrase is searching for their king's core, and it has a sound as low as the heartbeat, so they go around killing people to locate it. Tuya makes him refer to the war from 5,000 years ago, and Endi explains that the phrases had the same purpose then, and something repaired the fraying barrier on the earth, so they return. And he is in this world, killing the phrases to pass time. Tuya questions who he is while on his way out, and he answers and says he is just a traveler. Tuya and Rosetta discuss the frame gears after considering it as the best option for defeating the army of phrases if they storm the world again. Tuya asks if anyone can power it, and if it can be mass-produced. She replies anyone can learn to use it through quality training, but the production of the frame gear can take up to a day with a lot of materials required for production. She mentions that only 4 or 5 units per type were produced and stored in the hangars because they had no reason to continue production when the phrases disappeared. Tuya, disappointed at the information, decides to find the hangar of Babylon. At the mansion, Sango, Kokuyu, and Kohaku suggest that Tuya makes a pact with the Flame Emperor that will give him access to use the flying birds to find the information he seeks. They use summoning magic to summon her, and when she appears, she succumbs to Tuya without hassle, and tells him to forge a pact and give her a name, Kogyoku. Tuya, surprised at her, asks for her reasons, and she explains that if he is strong enough to be the master of the White and Black Emperors, then she stands no chance. Tuya gives her a name, and he summons different birds to help him find information on the ruins of Babylon and wherever they may be located. Tuya, still half asleep on his bed, finds Yumina by his side. He is shocked by her presence after remembering he went to bed alone. She wakes up and tells him it is normal for a husband and a wife to sleep on the bed together, and he has been so busy that they have not spent time together. Tuya says they are not married yet, but Yumina discards his opinion, and she leaves to get changed for breakfast. Tuya lies under a tree in the garden and discusses with Kohaku, telling her Yumina was too forward with her actions. Kohaku tells him he has a bumpy ride ahead with his 5 wives. Suddenly, Kugyoku flies towards him, and she says she has information about the ruins and a pitch black pyramid made from some unusual material was detected. Tuya compares it to the ruins of the alchemy ward. He gathers all his fiancés and Lee to give them the information. He presents the map, and Lucia tells him it is located on the western side of the kingdom of Sandora, and the island is a lot smaller than Brunhild. Tuya explains he wishes the ruins turn out to be the hangar, but Lean says she wants the library, and they all place bets on the other types of ruins. Tuya explains what Enda said about the advanced phrases coming and destroying the world to search for their king. They start their search for the pyramid. While in the forest, they get attacked by a rhinoceros and a mighty ape. The girls finish up the monsters themselves without Tuya's help, and he stands, looking at them without knowing what to do. Suddenly, Paula's teddy bear taps him and takes him to the pyramid's location. He enters and finds a teleportation circle. To his excitement, he communicates with his servant animals through the telepathy network and tells them what he has found. Tuya teleports to another drifting island, and a young girl appears as the island's administrator. She introduces herself as Monica on Tuya's demand after trying to attack him, but he dodges. Unlike the other terminals, she tests Tuya's compatibility by his ability to dodge the attack from her. He uses the slip and shield spells to stop her on her 2 attempts, and she falls until she gives up to him. She kisses him, and records his genetic information to transfer the ownership of the hangar to him. Tuya's face lights up when he discovers it is the hangar. He asks her about the flame gears, and she mentions they are present. They walk into the hangar, and Tuya is surprised about how big it is from the inside. They finally see the gear, and it has the form of a giant robot. Tuya asks if he can get in, and Monica answers yes, but the machine will not run because it has no fuel. She tells him the machine uses ether liquid and can be gotten from the research lab. Tuya expresses his disappointment after discovering he has to locate the research lab. Monica gives him another option of meeting Flora, the terminal for the alchemy ward. At the ward, Flora says she can produce the fuel, but it will be inferior compared to the fuel produced at the research lab. Tuya tells her to proceed regardless. She requests for an ether ore, an ore with the ability to store, amplify, and release magical energy. Linza asks her if the spellstone is a form of ether ore, and she accesses and affirms it. Tuya celebrates, but the girls are not elated. Linza explains that the spellstones are precious items, and they cannot be easily found, especially at the size Flora requires. Tuya gets disappointed again, but Ye suggests he use his phone to search for any. He searches, and they find a spot in Brunhild as well. They proceed to their next mission, mining spellstones. Tuya returns to the alchemy ward with a large spellstone, and Flora agrees it will be more than enough. Tuya visits the hangar to check out the frame gears, and he expresses his eagerness to try the gears after 1 month. Rosetta and Monica enter the hangar while arguing with each other. Rosetta says she wants to do a maintenance check on the gears, since it has been a long time, and it may have gotten dusty. Monica disagrees and claims she has been taking good care of the hangar. Tuya disagrees with her after remembering the damage she made on the access point. Rosetta tells Tuya to enter the frame units while they do a little training test run. He sits in the training pilot seat while Monica acts as his opponent. She shows him some of the features while Rosetta operates the manuals. Tuya defeats Monica in their training battle. Tuya makes copies of the training pilot frame units for everyone in the castle to train with. He wants everyone to be properly skilled before the gears are set into action, and also the mass production of the gears in the workshop. They are all eager to use the gear. Tuya stands in the corridor while in thought, and he suddenly gets rumbled by Sue, who begs him to marry her. Her butler, Lime, explains that she has an arranged marriage with the first prince of the Linhea kingdom, Prince Zaboon, but he does not concede to the marriage. He explains that the prince has a bad reputation preceding him, especially amongst women, and he has not been crowned the king after 30 because of his bad habits. Tuya also disagrees with the idea, and he tells her to seek the advice of the other fiancés inside. Everyone says they are ready to accept Sue, and Yumina says it is due to happen. Tuya expresses concerns about causing a rift between the two nations, so he decides to reach out to the Duke on her behalf. In the Duke's castle, they both discuss the situation, and the Duke explains to Tuya that he does not like the idea of his daughter marrying the prince either. Tuya asks why he has not been expelled from the royal family despite the bad records, and the Duke replies he has the support of Prime Minister Wardak, who is from the same family as the prince's mother. He uses his status to get away with his bad behavior. The Duke mentions that the only decent person is the second prince, who is a concubine's son, and his mother has been isolated due to her sickness, so he has no royal support to claim the throne. The butler interrupts their conversation to inform them of the arrival of an emissary from Linhea. The Duke declines the proposal, saying his daughter is already engaged to Tuya, the Grand Duke of the Duchy of Brunhild. The emissary worships Tuya, and says he has heard a lot about him and his teleportation. He introduces himself as the second prince, Cloud, and requests that Tuya save his mother. The Duke and Tuya react shocked at the information. The prince explains that his mother is not isolated due to sickness, but has been locked up as a prisoner. Tuya asks about the king, but he says he fears being killed by Prime Minister Wardak, and so has been silent. Tuya thinks within himself, and concludes that the Prime Minister would want his bloodline to be the king. The Duke tells Tuya they will hold an urgent summit of the Western nations to consider deposing the first prince, and instating the second prince as the heir to the throne. The monarchs of the Western nations assemble in a meeting with Prince Cloud. They all agree to depose the ill-mannered prince and take the side of the second prince, after hearing about the prince's ill treatment towards his people. Tuya gives him the option of fleeing after healing his mother, but he rejects the offer, saying he has to save the people from suffering. They ask if he has any allies, and he mentions the Prime Minister who has been backing him. Tuya, Yae, and Elsa teleport the prince back to the palace, and they use the invisibility spell to accompany him to the courtroom to hear the prince's response to the rejection of his proposal. They get to the courtroom, and Prince Zaboon welcomes his brother in a distasteful way. Elsa notices a girl with the enslavement collar on her neck. When Prince Cloud relays the message to him, he slaps him hard, saying he could have abducted her or created a scene. He says he only wants to marry her to put an enslavement collar on her neck. He asks their reason for the rejection, and Cloud tells him she is engaged to someone else. Prince Zaboon instructs Cloud to return to Belfast and spread a rumor about Tuya, the Grand Duke of Brunhild, for his nature among women and how he maltreats them. Prince Cloud observes him with scornful eyes. Zaboon notices this and tramples on him for being rude to him. Prince Zaboon's mother walks in looking pompous and gives him accolades for teaching his brother a lesson. According to him, she asks about the proposal, and he says it was rejected. Zaboon asks his mother if he can ascend the throne without getting engaged, and she says she will speak to Wardak about it. They all march inside the palace. All the while, Tuya, Elsa, and Ye all observe him angrily. Tuya heals the prince and asks him about the slave girl. Cloud says he bought bought her from traders in the kingdom of Sandora, despite slavery not being allowed in the kingdom. Tuya teleports her into the room, and he removes her enslavement collar. Zaboon calls out of his room in search of his slave. He asks Cloud, and he answers that he has not seen her. Wardak comes down and meets him and worries. Cloud notifies Tuya about Wardak. He tells him to kill the girl if she does not heed his call, and he will take care of her body when she is found. Seconds later, the enslavement collar winds up with force and would have choked the girl to death. Tuya, Elza, and Ye tail the Prime Minister and Prince Zaboon to listen to their conversation. Wardak tells Zaboon they will send Cloud to the kingdom of Paluf as an emissary to declare a letter of war. Tuya and the girls tell Prince Cloud about this information. Ye explains he would deliver the letter as an official letter, but the real contents will be a war declaration. The recipient will get furious and will attack Prince Cloud. Tuya informs him they will be going after the Prime Minister and asks if he is ready. The prince agrees, and they proceed with their plan. Prince Cloud tells them his mother is held captive in the Gallia fortress within the Prime Minister's domain. Tuya, Cloud, and the girls enter the fortress with their invisibility spell, and Tuya locks the guards with paralysis. Cloud is shocked, but Ye tells him to get used to it. They enter the tower and rescue his mom. Tuya teleports them to the former Prime Minister, Marquis Coop's house. Marquis expresses his happiness after realizing the monarchs of the Western nation are on Cloud's side, and he hopes to get his revenge. Wardak walks into Zaboon's room and announces the escape of Cloud's mother, Queen Aria. He says the messenger bird saw her leaving with her son. They plan to force the king into announcing Zaboon as his successor. After everyone leaves the room, Wardak and Zaboon's mother Daisha decide to kill every member of the royal family. Tuya records his confession and his claim about Zaboon being his son, so they will rule the kingdom. Tuya plays the recorded video for Cloud, Marquis, and the girls. Cloud says he will take full action now that he has discovered the truth. Tuya plans to show the king the recording. The next day, everyone gathers in the courtroom to hear the king's announcement. He makes his plans to cede his throne to his first prince and retire known to them. He announces his successor to be his first prince, Cloud, to everyone's amazement. The prince comes out to receive his claim. Wardak and Daisha come out in Zaboona's defense, and they say it is his right as the first prince to be the next king. Cloud calls Tuya in, and he walks in with Kohaku in its tiger form alongside Elza and Ye. He displays the recording of the Wardak and Daisha for everyone to see. The king condemns them and tells them he has been yielding to their demands because they have Aria in their domain, and now that she is free, he will ensure to punish them. Zaboon tries to defend himself, saying he did not plot to kill the king. The king says he has done a lot of evil deeds that he has overlooked and will suffer for. Tuya scares him with his gun and shoots it in, missing his target intentionally, while reminding him of the innocent people he has killed. The king gives the mantle to Cloud to decide. Cloud arrests and asks them to be locked up in the dungeon. He arrests all the allies of Wardak in the state, and he sells Wardak, Daisha, and Zaboon to a slave kingdom. The monarchs of the western states congratulate Cloud for his succession. Tuya feels fulfilled for completing his task and is excited about the flame gears. Sue rushes in and hugs him from behind. She says she is proud of him as her husband for defeating Zabni. Tuya says he is not certain, but she says her father had already told her he accepted. He thinks about his other fiancées and considers that they have agreed to it. He looks to her like a younger sister, but he tells her he will not get married until he is 18. Sue smiles happily, and she hugs him. Olga and Sir Lion get married with their friends and family present. Olga's father and General Leon appreciate Tuya for presenting a speech at their ceremony. They give him the accolades for bridging the gap between the two of them. Arma calls out to her father, and they leave him. Yumina appears beside him and talks about the two of them. Sue jumps out from behind and grabs Tuya's hands like a baby. She tells him she cannot wait to get married to him, and Tuya shuts her, saying their engagement has not yet been announced. Yumina laughs and says they cannot witness the beauty of the wedding and not wish to be married as well. The other fiancés imagine themselves in wedding gowns. Tuya says he would have to do 6 weddings, but Yumina comments and asks if it is truly 6. Tuya defends himself and begs Yumina to spare him from having more. At the castle, Tuya and his fiancés, except Sue, gather together. Yumina speaks to them and says after the wedding she has been thinking about how they can bond in love and get to know each other. Lucia agrees with her. Yumina proposed a date where they all go out together to strengthen their intimacy. Tuya questions her choice, but they all say they barely see him, and they feel lonely. He agrees to their demands, and they plan on a date. Tuya stands outside his mansion, dressed the same as always as he waits for his fiancées. They all run out and meet him wearing dresses from Zanek's shop in the outfit he designed for him. He is dumbfounded by the girl's beauty in the dresses. Yumina snaps him out of his thoughts. He says they are cute and they all blush. Yumina says she specifically requested the dresses for the date. They all walk through the city of Refrees with Lucia and Linza by his side. and the others walk on their own. Tuya notices the rock, paper, and scissors game they played before to determine who would stay by his side. He smiles to himself and says he's happy about it. They visit a pearl jewelry shop, and he suggests buying gifts for everyone, which they agree to. They visit a restaurant, and Yumina alongside Elsa stays by his side when they eat, and they offer to feed him. On their way, they notice a play advert display. Yumina suggests they watch the play in the theater. Tuya determined by its title that it might be fitting for their date. Lindsay cuts in and says it is a romance play. She starts narrating the story, but Elsa cuts her short, saying she is about to narrate the whole story, which will no longer feel new when they watch it. Immediately, a group of men try to attack them. They demand money from him and give him the option of releasing the girls to him. The girls, expressing their anger at the men, attack them and beat them up. On their way home, they regret meeting the bandits, but they mention they had fun. At the mansion's entrance, they spot a raging Sue, who accuses them of leaving her behind. The next day, he takes Sue on a personal date. She says he will be spending all day with her. They visit the jewelry store, restaurant, and the hills. When they arrive at the edge of a stream, they see some children playing and having fun. Sue calls Tuya incredible for making everyone in his country happy. While they sit and discuss, Tuya hears Kohaku's voice in the telepathy network, and Flora tells him the ether liquid has been completely extracted. Tuya's face lights up at the news. At the testing ground, Yae is the first to pilot the frame gears, and she goes in with Kugyoku so she can communicate with Tuya. Lucia asks why Tuya is not the first to try it since he has been anticipating piloting the frame gears. Tuya replies that Yae has the least magical capacity among them, so he wants to be certain everyone can pilot it. Yae pilots the gears, and she comes out to inform them it is just the same as the training frame units. When she stops, Tuya intends to go next, but he suddenly sees the gear moving. He discovers Elsa stormed into the gear to use it, and he gets sad about it. Rosetta presented Tuya with his antiphase sword, which she formed from the body parts of the phase they defeated. Tuya thanks him, and Rosetta praises him for his incredible ideas. He asks her about the gears, and she says they are still in production, but she needs orichalcum. Tuya sets out to fetch the orichalcum. While on his way, Yumina and Lucia run after him, and ask what he is ignoring his wives to do. He tells them his mission, and asks if they know the location of orichalcum, but they claim they don't. He uses the map to search, and he finds them in different locations. He decides to leave the girls and use his flying spell to travel. On his arrival at his selected town, Tuya meets the town under the attack of a group of phrases. A young lady in knight armor with a group of soldiers behind her instructs them to secure the safety of all the villagers while she distracts the phrase. She attacks it with her sword, but it breaks. The phrase tries to attack and injure her with its metal tentacle, but Tuya stops it with his mithril sword made of the phase's body. He tells the lady to assist them in saving the villagers while he uses Excel and Boost to cut through the phrase cores, and he succeeds. Tuya heals the injured soldiers and people with his aerial healing magic. The lady introduces herself as Hildegard Minas Lestia, the first princess of the Night Kingdom of Lestia. Tuya, surprised about her title, introduces himself, and she says she has heard a lot about him. She asks about his sword, and he explains it to her. He offers her a sword from his storage after seeing her interest. He takes her permission to take the fragments of the phrase. The princess says she hopes they meet again and they part ways. Tuya defeats the orichalcum golem in the forest successfully, and sends it into his storage. Before leaving, he sees a deer standing strangely, and he runs after it until he gets to a stream and sees a young girl in a pool of blood. He tries to heal her with magic, but she has lost a lot of blood. She becomes unconscious. Tuya walks with Flora in the alchemy ward while they discuss the girl he brought on their way to see her. Tuya commends Flora for regenerating her missing body and healing her to sound health in just one day. Flora reports one problem with her recovery. She says she has amnesia and has no record of who she is again. Tuya asks if the treatment caused the fall, but she tells him she is not responsible. They enter the girl's room, and Tuya greets her. He asks her name and what happened to her, but she claims she doesn't know anything about herself. Tuya decides to give her a name, Sakura, meaning her hair is pretty like the color of cherry blossoms. She accepts the name and forces a smile. Tuya, Elsa, and Lucia talk about Sakura and her health. Lucia asks if she is out of the alchemy ward, and Tuya replies that she is in the castle's guest room. Elsa says she is too carefree for someone who lost her memory. Tuya explains that she has no reason to be sad about it since she possesses no memory of her past. They both agree with her, and they go to their respective locations. Tuya walks towards the garden, and he listens to Sakura singing melodiously. He is impressed by her voice, and asks if she loves singing. She says she can't remember, but it feels like she does. Tuya shows her a piano, and he plays her music while she sings along. His fiancés arrive, and they applaud her for having such a beautiful voice. They request that she sing more songs for them, and she accepts. A receptionist from the guild comes to Tuya's castle to seek his assistance in defeating a monster. She asks if Tuya knows about the Catoblepas monsters. He declines, and she narrates it to him. She says the monster spews poison on its opponent, and uses its mystic eyes to turn people to stone after paralyzing their feet to the ground. Tuya calls it petrification, and he confirms from the receptionist that the monster has taken over the Militia Mountains. She tells him that 3 different parties, with 13 individual adventurers, have been turned to stone. The guild seeks the help of the highest rank adventurers, and he happens to be on the list. Tuya asks about the other adventurers, and she explains that only one more adventurer fits the description, and he is the king of Lestia, who is in his 70s. Tuya remembers his encounter with his daughter, and he smiles. He checks the bounty for the quests, and he accepts it immediately. He calls for a meeting with his fiancés and Lean. He tells them about the adventure, and they are surprised he considered the quest because of the reward. He explains to them that building the gear model is not cheap, and he needs enough money. They reason with him, and Linza says the Catoblepas is a monster that rarely appears. Lean supports her point, and says they are not much in existence, because they rarely mate. They both possess the mystic eyes of petrification and can petrify each other during mating. Lucia and Ye express their sadness for them, and Tuya pats Ye's head. He announces he is heading out for the hunt, and they all propose coming along with him, except Lean, who makes her decision to stay back. Tuya presents Ye with an anti-phrase sword, and she thanks him while they travel with the hangar floating island. The other girls come in looking at him with jealousy, and he promises them he has a sword for everyone. In the forest, Tuya senses the Catoblepas, and he tells everyone to hide. He reminds them of the recovery spell in their rings, and assures them they cannot be petrified. They spot the monster finally, and Tuya tries to attack it, while the girls use their powers and skills to attack it, but the monster is unaffected. It releases poisonous gases, and Tuya tells everyone to get distant. Lindsay almost inhales the poison, but he runs and moves her away with his fly spell. He retrieves his mithril blade from the storage and applies a gravity spell on it, which doubles the weight, and he cuts off the head of the monster from its body. Tuya gets petrified, but he uses his recovery spell to break free, and they celebrate their successful defeat. Lucia suddenly cries out in pain. She sits on the floor, petrified by the dead Catoblepas eyes, but she uses the recovery spell immediately. Linza calms her down while she breaks off the petrification, but it has ruined her clothes, and she is butt naked. They warn Tuya to turn away. While Tuya is looking away, he surprisingly sees a second Catoblepa. He gets petrified again and he recovers. He instructs the girls to stay still. He uses a magic spell Mosaic, which he remembers from the spellbook, to block the monster's sight, and they attack it easily. The girls commend their teamwork, while Lucia feels exempted as she was unable to contribute. At the castle, the receptionist apologizes for giving them information on just one Catoblepa, and Tuya waves off the need to apologize. Tuya, forgetting that petrification affects clothes, recovers the petrified adventurers, and they all scream at the sight of their nakedness. Tuya invites the monarchs of the western nation, including Prince Cloud, to test the frame gears. They all have fun battling each other with the gears. The Beastman in particular is very energetic about it. They finish their training and walk up to Tuya to thank him for the experience. The King of Belfast mentions that if he had a frame unit in their kingdom, they would take their time to practice efficiently. Tuya proposes lending it to all of them, and they all accept. He asks them to train their knights with it. Tuya says in his mind that Brunhild may not be large enough to defeat the masses of phrases when they eventually invade the world, and so the other kingdoms will contribute their help. In the kingdom of Lestia, Princess Hilda sits down, staring at the sword Tuya gifted her, and sighs repeatedly. Her grandfather walks in after noticing her countenance. He confirms Tuya's words about the sword having a unique production process, and he asks for her opinion on what should be done about him, and his possession of many mysterious weapons, which he heard rumors about. Tuya adjusts the design of his personal frame gear, the Night Baron, with his phone. He calls out to Rosetta, who is dressed as a military lady and is working on the machines. He informs her of his new update, and she says she will adjust it in a jiffy. Suddenly, Tuya receives a message from Kohaku through the telepath network. She says he has a guest who claims to be his elder sister. Tuya is surprised because he claims he does not have an elder sister. He then hears the voice of the divine being of love, while she is trying to interrupt their conversation. Tuya returns to the castle, and the divine being of love hugs him happily in front of his fiancées. They feel emotional for them, and decide to leave them to have their family conversation. The divine being of love waves to them as they leave. She tells Tuya she is on vacation when he asks her purpose. She mentions that she intends to soak the power of love around Tuya, because she has been having stiff shoulders from just peeking at his love stories, and will be staying with them for a while. Lapis enters and announces he has a messenger from the Night Kingdom of Lestia. who has been waiting for over an hour. The divine being of love pesters Tuya with side comments about the messenger, and he questions why she looks smug about the situation. Lapis informs him the messengers are in the knight's training ground. Tuya spots Princess Hilda of Lestia in the knight's training ground, while she is observing the knight's training. He approaches her and demands her reason for visiting. She tells him she only came as an escort for her grandfather. The grandfather walks in and introduces himself as the previous king of Lestia, Galen Yunus Lestia. He thanks Tuya for the gift he offered to Hilda and says he is in town to do some sightseeing. He gives Tuya a pretend shake to Tuya's surprise, and he calls it an old habit. He also comments on Lapis, and says she is well trained and is not just an ordinary maid. Lestia warns her father they are not in Lestia, and he has to be well behaved. Tuya is surprised at his detection. He asks Tuya about the frame gears that are rumored to be produced in Brunhild. Tuya offers to lead him then. At the gear training ground, Tuya explains the concept of the gear to Galen. He instructs Monica to power the gear, and she operates it to their amazement. Galen asks him how many gears he possesses and what he intends to use them for. Tuya reveals he has over a dozen in his possession, and intends to use them to defeat the Phrases. He says he does not intend to use them for war, and he will lease them out occasionally to their ally nations to defeat giant monsters and prevent landslides. Galen questions if he were to be an ally, he would be able to borrow the gears, and Tuya affirms. Galen says he would discuss it with his son, but is certain he has no reason to decline the alliance offer. Hilda requests a duel with the strongest warrior in the kingdom. Tuya handpicks Ye, and the duo duel together. Hilda wins the fight and commends Ye for being a strong knight, but Ye corrects her and says she is Tuya's fiancée. Hilda is disappointed when she hears the news about her and his 5 other fiancés. The divine being of love and Ye convince her to marry Tuya. Ye tells her she was just like her initially until Yumina accepted her and Tuya engaged her. Hilda accepts to be Tuya's 7th wife. Tuya remains speechless as always, while the women take charge. Garen suddenly comes in and challenges Hilda to duel with him in the context of the marriage to prove the extent of her love. Tuya is shocked because he was expecting Garen to fetch him for the duel. Yumina sets a round table meeting for the wives of Tuya. She asks if anyone is against Hilda joining the list, and no one disagrees. Hilda beams joyfully, and hopes they will accept her nature as a warrior princess. Sue motivates her with compelling words. The divine being of love, Karen, strings Hilda to reveal the first time she fell in love with Tuya. Hilda mentions how he looked dazzling, and how the space around him was so bright. She tells them she could not stop thinking about him after their encounter, and she sneakily followed her grandfather to Brunhild after hearing about his intention to visit. They all agree with her, and claim that was how they felt about him. Karen hopes she becomes his fiancée soon. Yumina reminds her about the duel with her grandfather. Elsa asks if she thinks she can win, but Hilda says her grandfather is strong, and she has a very low chance. Sue assures her that their husband, Taoya, is stronger and will make her win. At the dueling ground, Hilda and Garen battle against each other. The girls notice how strong Garen is, and they fear she might not make the battle. Toya distracts Garen with a mirage spell that shows the image of a sexy woman in a bikini from Tuya's smartphone. Hilda grabs the opportunity and defeats her grandfather. While she is rejoicing, Yumina queries Tuya about the lady, and he intentionally runs off to meet Hilda. Garen tells Hilda he has assessed her resolve and will allow their engagement. He tells Tuya to care for Hilda properly. The girls jealously ponder over the image, and they question Tuya's interests. The wives gather for another round table meeting. Hilda says she is excited to be a part of them now that she is officially his fiancée. She questions them about Tuya's parents and says she would love to visit them. The twins say Tuya does not talk about his personal life, and they have never seen his parents. Karen appears again and explains to them that Tuya's life is complicated, which is why he has refused to talk about himself. She says she understands their desire to learn more about him, so she promises to tell them a piece of confidential information about his first love when he was younger. Kohaku fears this information might cause a huge problem for Tuya, so she tries to connect with him through the telepathy network. Kohaku realizes she is blocked from connecting with Tuya by Karen. She apologizes to her master for not being strong enough. Karen carries on with divulging the information, and she vivaciously says she is brimming with power from their love story. Tuya sneezes hard while walking from the table, and Sakura asks if he is okay. Kugyoko receives new information about the ruins in Hilda's town, Lestia, from the birds, and she relays it to Tuya. Tuya turns to go inside, but he finds all his fiancés, including Lin and Sakura, wearing a particular outfit design. Yumina asks if he likes them, because they are similar to his first love, Shuko's outfit. When he asks who gave them the information, Yumina mentions Karen. Tuya silently curses at her. Linza asks him if he does not like them, and after assessing their innocent faces, he compliments them with a fake smile. They jump in excitement. Tuya arrives at the new floating island and discovers the tower. However, the terminal for the rampart appears to him and introduces herself as Leora. Tuya is surprised because he was expecting the tower. She says her Rampart Island made contact with the tower 347 years ago, so they are now one. She tells him she knows he possesses all affinities, but he needs to show his compatibility. Tuya informs her he is compatible with 4 other islands. Leora assures him that is enough, and she deems him compatible, and immediately transfers ownership to him. Tuya is amazed he didn't go through the usual test procedures. She leads him to meet the administrator of the tower. They meet the administrator of the tower, sleeping at the base of a tree. Tuya asks Leora to wake her, but she refuses to get up. Leora asks for food from Tuya, and he brings out some skewers from his storage. She uses food as bait for her, and asks her to wake up if she wants the skewers. She instantly opens her eyes and eats the food. She asks for Tuya's name, and he answers. He mentions that Rampart has acknowledged him, so he demands the tower's acknowledgement. The administrator Pamela says she has just 2 conditions for compatibility: enough food to eat and a warm place to sleep. Tuya agrees, and she transfers the ownership to him. She records his genetic generation after kissing him. She demands more food from him, and he gives her more skewers. Leora also kisses him to transfer his genetic information, and Tuya collapses after. She apologizes and says she has never kissed a man. She is more acquainted with entertaining the professor at night. Inside the tower, Pamela starts explaining, but she dozes while standing. Tuya wants to wake her angrily, but Leora cuts in and explains what the tower is about. She says the tower is the heart of Babylon, and it contains a massive reactor that draws magic particles from the air into the tower, amplifies them, and converts them to magical energy. Leora takes Tuya to the rampart, and she calls it the central pillar of Babylon's defense system that can deploy a defensive shield against physical and magical attacks. Tuya says the tower can speed up the mass production of the frame gears and ether liquid, while they count on sturdy defenses from the rampart's shield. He uses magic to lift Pamela while she sleeps and drops her on a surface. Leora assesses Tuya's fiancés in the garden, and notices they are incomplete after seeing the future through the professor. She asks Tuya where the other wives are, and Ye comes out to say Sua's returned to Belfast for the time being, but she still asks the same question. Suddenly, Tuya hears Kohaku's voice through their telepathy network. She says he has an urgent letter from the gate mirror in Belfast. Tuya opens the gate, and Kohaku comes in with the letter. Tuya reads it and says the king of Belfast's wife is in labor. Outside the queen's room, Sue and Tuya wait patiently for the king, and he comes out with a baby boy. He shows his exuberance at his newborn child, and asks Tuya to give him a name. Tuya, after thorough consideration, names him Yamato. The king flips the baby into the air, and he starts crying. Yumina, the twins, and Ye come out of the room, and Yumina tells her father to stop the baby from crying. Linza says the queen seeks his attention, and he runs off happily. They all smile at his excitement. The ladies discuss the new prince's birth and the hot spring bath. They talk about how excited the people of Belfast are, and how the Western nations have sent their congratulatory letters and gifts to the palace. Linza breaks the ice and says they will all give birth to Toya's sons one day. Elsa looks with fearful eyes and agrees. Tuya is outside with the administrators, and they tell him what his fiancés are discussing. He says he has not considered having children. According to the professor, Laura tells him he will have more than 9 children because each of his 9 wives will give him children. Tuya gasps in shock after discovering he will still marry 2 more wives. Cheska says they have told Lean about it. Tuya commands them not to mention it to any other person. Cheska asks if he would consider adding her to the remaining list of his wives, and the others chip in, making the same requests. Tuya argues with them, and says they are not listening to him. Yumina and the other fiancés appear to them, and Elsie questions Tuya about what they're discussing. Tuya lies and says nothing. Yumina asks Leora, knowing she can't lie. Tuya tries to stop her from talking, but Ye drags him away. Leora confesses the professor's predictions about his 9 wives and the reason why Babylon was split into 9 parts. They return to the castle, and Tuya kneels while the girls discuss among themselves. They finally conclude, and Yumina speaks on their behalf. She says they have always known he would marry several wives, and 7 is not so far from 9, but they find him guilty of keeping the truth from them. She assigns him the punishment of kissing all his fiancés. Tuya, embarrassed about the punishment, tries to look for an escape route, but Sakura and Lean tell him he has to face his punishment. He remembers Prince Yamato's birth celebration, and uses it as an excuse. He says he will fulfill his obligation afterward. They agree with him. At the prince's celebration in Tuya's castle, there is merry and fun. The administrators throw fireworks from above and the ladies marvel at the view. Yumina walks up to Tuya and says he looks happy. Tuya says he understands the joy of growing a family after experiencing the king's joy the day his son was born. He says he doesn't have children yet, but he has his wives, workers, and the country, so he will do everything it takes to keep them safe. Yumina, captivated by his words, kisses him. Linza sees them and kisses him too. He kisses Sue on the cheeks and she gets angry. He tries kissing the other wives, but he gets punched by Elsa and Ya. Hilda faints, and Lucia runs away. Cheska brings out the clairvoyance gem the professor uses to check the future from the hangar. The administrators check Tuya's future, and he gets married to all 9 wives for real.